Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Hélier. Madame le Connétable de Saint-Laurent.
Présente.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Brelade.
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de la Trinité.
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Pierre.
Présent.
Madame le Connétable de Saint-Martin.
Présente.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Jean.
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Clément.
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de Grouville.
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de Sainte-Bonne. Monsieur le Connétable de Sainte-Marie.
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Sauveur.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy Southern. Madame le Deputy Labbé.
Présente.
Monsieur le Deputy Tadier. Monsieur le Deputy Luce.
Présent.
Madame le Deputy Dublé.
Présente.
Monsieur le Deputy Morel. Madame le Deputy Lehegara. Monsieur le Deputy Ayer. Monsieur le Deputy Ward.
Présent.
Madame le Deputy Alves. Madame le Deputy Gardner. Monsieur le Deputy Gorst.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy Farnham. Madame le Deputy Moore.
Elle est malade.
Next time round, I think.
It's okay.
Monsieur le Deputy Mezek.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy Ozef. Monsieur le Deputy Balash.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy Coles.
Présent.
Madame le Deputy Poré. Monsieur le Deputy War.
Présent.
Madame le Deputy Miles. Madame le Deputy Scott.
Présente.
Monsieur le Deputy Renouf.
Présent.
Madame le Deputy Curtis. Madame le Deputy Feltham.
Madam the Deputy Feltham.
Présente.
Madame le Deputy Binet. Madame le Deputy Jeune.
Présente.
Madame le Deputy Miller.
Présente.
Madame le Deputy Howell.
Présente.
Monsieur le Deputy Binet. Monsieur le Deputy Ferry.
Présent.
Madame le Deputy Kovac.
Présente.
Monsieur le Deputy Curtis. Madame le Deputy Ward.
Présente.
Madame le Deputy Wilson. Madame le Deputy Stevenson. Monsieur le Deputy Andrews.
Monsieur le Doyen.
Notre aide soit au nom de Dieu qui a fait le ciel et la terre. Amen. Seigneur Dieu, Père éternel et tout-puissant, qui a établi le gouvernement et la puissance de la terre pour le règlement et pour la conduite du peuple, et qui nous a commandé d'avoir toujours pour but le gloire de ton saint nom. Nous te prions qu'il te plaise de donner à cette assemblée le don de conseil et de prudence, d'unir les cœurs et les affections de tous ceux qui la composent, et de la conduire tellement toi-même par ton Saint-Esprit que toute leur délibération est accompagnée de ta bénédiction. Réussisse au bien et au soulagement du peuple, qu'il te plut de commettre à leurs soins. Car nous t'en prions au nom et par les mérites de ton Fils bien-aimé Jésus-Christ, notre Seigneur, qui nous a enseigné à t'invoquer en disant: Notre Père, qui es aux cieux, ton nom soit sanctifié, ton règne vienne, ta volonté soit faite en la terre comme au ciel. Donne-nous aujourd'hui notre pain quotidien, et nous pardonnons nos offenses, comme nous pardonnons à ceux qui nous ont offensés. Et ne nous envoie pas en tentation, mais délivre-nous du mal. Car à toi le règne, la puissance et la gloire, au siècle des siècles. Amen.
Monsieur le Deputy Southern.
Présent. Juste.
Monsieur le Deputy Tadier.
Deputy Tadier is on state's business. The conference that the president is APF.
Very well, state's business.
Monsieur le Deputy Morel.
Présent.
Madame le Deputy Alves.
Ma'am, sorry. Deputy Alves emailed all states members about a situation. She has a family emergency that is extended and would ask to be excused if possible.
Members agree? Excusez.
Madame le député Moore,
Elle est malade.
vous jurez que Madame le député Moore est tellement indisposée qu'elle ne peut pas assister aux États sans exposer sa santé. Monsieur le député Joseph,
Défaut.
Madame le député Miles,
Sir, Deputy Miles is still returning from a fundraising trip to Colombia. It was booked, it was been arranged, since it was booked in about 2019-2020. The arrangements were confirmed at the start of last year, and she was committed to it before she was even elected. I was also on the trip, but for reasons that escaped me, I took the shorter version, which is, I have no idea why I did that. So it was a commitment prior to election, so I'd ask that she's excusée.
Do members accept that the deputy can be excusé in these circumstances? Excusé.
Madame le député Curtis,
Deputy Curtis is malade.
vous jurez que Madame le député Curtis est tellement indisposée qu'elle ne peut pas assister aux États sans exposer sa santé. Madame le député Stevenson,
Défaut. Les États sont constitués. Right, very well. There is nothing under A, B, or A, I should say. A number of subordinate enactments have been tabled under B. A number of matters have been presented or laid as described on the consolidated order paper under section C. Under section D, the following matters have been lodged. Cash payment to government sports facilities, P10 amendment, lodged by the Minister for Infrastructure. Update of higher education student funding, P12 amendment, lodged by the Minister for Education and Lifelong Learning. Pay gap reporting, lodged by Deputy Dublé, P13. Termination of employment minimum notice periods, P14, lodged by Deputy Andrews. Channel Island lottery distribution of proceeds 2024, P15, lodged by the Minister for Sustainable Economic Development. There is nothing under E. We come on, therefore, to elections. In accordance with Standing Order 122, the Assembly is due to appoint a member of the Privileges and Procedures Committee, who is also a member of the Scrutiny Liaison Committee. In addition, in accordance with the Standing Order 1229, I therefore invite the Chair to make the nomination for member of the PPC in those circumstances.
Thank you, sir. I would like to propose Deputy Louise Dublé for the Privileges and Procedures Committee.
Is the nomination seconded? Yes. Are there any other nominations? Very well, Deputy Dublé is thus appointed. In accordance with Standing Order 124, the Assembly is due to appoint an unelected member of the Public Accounts Committee. Under that standing order, the Chair is obliged to give 14 days' notice of nominations, and other members are then able to provide alternative nominations at least 2 clear working days before the meeting. No other such nominations were received, so I invite Deputy Gardner as Chair to make her nominations.
Thank you, sir. I just would like to raise, because in this standing order, I have first nomination for 2 elected members, and after 2 unelected members, I'm happy to do either way.
Well, let's, the way I've got it is the other way around. So
Okay, just making sure that we also
that's
have
quite all
nomination
right.
for the elected
We're
members.
dealing with the unelected members.
So I would like to appoint Mr. Graham Phipps and Mr. Philip Taylor to be unelected members on the Public Accounts Committee. 2 gentlemen served at Public Accounts Committee from May 2022, and they were re-invited to join this Public Accounts Committee.
Are those nominations seconded? Yes. As there are no other nominations, they are duly appointed as unelected members to the Public Accounts Committee. In accordance with Standing Order 1237, the Assembly is due to appoint an additional elected member of the Public Accounts Committee. In addition, in accordance with that standing order, I invite the Chair of PAC to make her nomination.
Thank you, sir. And I would like to appoint 2 elected members to the Public Accounts Committee, Deputy Christina Moore and Deputy David Wall.
Are those nominations seconded?
Yes, sir.
Are there any other nominations? If there are no other nominations, then They are appointed as members of the PAC. There are no matters under G, no matters under H. There are a number of written questions which have been answered under L. Yes, Deputy?
So I would like to ask to refer back written question 80. I believe there are some inaccuracy, and I have discussed with the minister, and he accepted that it would be good to review. So I would like to defer it back.
Which question is that?
80.
18.
80.
Sir,
Oh, I said written
Sir,
question.
may I just make clear that what I actually said was if you feel that the question is wrong, it's the right thing to do to refer it back. I can't confirm or not whether the numbers are correct, but if a deputy believes the question's wrong, I've done it myself and it's exactly the right thing to do.
You've invited the question is referred back to you. Clearly, you'll consider it and see what the information is incorrect, and that must be right. Written question, that's 80, so it's number 29 on the order paper. Very well. We come now to oral questions. The first question will be asked of Deputy Southern for the Minister for Health and Social Services. Deputy.
Thank you, sir. And it's a pleasure to be first up. Given the Minister's response to written question 30 of 2024 and recent research findings, will he agree, as a matter of urgency, to review, in consultation with the appropriate officers, the decision of the 13th of December 2023 made by the Medicines Optimisation Committee on the use of Kaftrio to treat cystic fibrosis patients carrying the specific gene mutation N1303K for a trial period of 3 months as an exception to NICE guidelines?
Minister.
Sir, I'd like to thank the Deputy for bringing this to my attention. I have to say that I sort of maintain my position in feeling that it's not appropriate for me to intervene directly in clinical matters. However, in light of the evidence provided, I have already referred the matter back along with the 6 connections that the Deputy kindly provided back to the Medicines Optimisation Committee and asked them to take another serious look at it, sir.
Much. Supplemental question, Deputy. Supplemental question?
Thank you, sir. Does the Minister have any idea of the timescale in which he might be able to produce a judgment from his committee and indeed from the department as to the urgent nature of treatment for CF patients in the department?
Sir, I have to confess I didn't think to set a timeline for this, but I would hope, given the nature of it, that the committee would take the occasion to look at it at their next meeting.
Deputy Coles.
Thank you, sir. Does the Minister know, or can the Minister confirm the number of islanders that suffer with cystic fibrosis?
I'm afraid I can't. This was only brought to my attention at the end of last week, but I'm certainly happy to look into that as well, sir.
Final supplementary, Deputy Sutton.
Thank you, sir. And can I ask the Minister to study what's already been found? I have a letter from the committee saying that should new studies come to light, they will research and re-examine their judgment on this matter, and can he ensure to better visibility that this is brought back to the state to his department in short order?
Minister.
Yes, sir, very happy to confirm that I'll do that.
Come now to question 2. The Connétable St Lawrence will ask of the same Minister. Connétable.
Thank you, sir. In respect of the Sandybrook Nursing Home, will the Minister advise why it does not provide the residents with ophthalmic or dental care or offer a dedicated transport service for them?
Sir, the Constable is quite correct that we don't offer dental or ophthalmic care at Sandybrook, and we don't provide a dedicated service. However, residents over 65 are eligible via Pension Plus, and they can gain financial support for that. That's paid through the CLS, whilst younger people can get that through income support and potentially through a special payment. And transport can be provided to appointments via patient transport. Alternatively, private taxi transport can be organised where necessary, and staff are available to support residents to attend appointments.
Supplemental question, Connie Todd?
Yes, thank you, sir. So I'm grateful to the Minister for his answer. What I would like to know then is why is there no procedures manual for patients and families so that they actually understand the answer to the questions that I've just asked? There's nothing provided for families or patients to know the policies of the nursing home. So will the Minister ensure that this is provided as a matter of priority, please?
Minister.
Yes, sir. That comes as something of a surprise. I had no idea that was the case. I'm very happy to look into doing that, and I'd just remind the Constable that I'm only an email away. If she has any concerns of this nature, she's absolutely free to get in touch with me and point them out, and I can take action accordingly, sir.
Very much. Deputy Sutherland.
Thank you, sir. On a closely related matter, it's come to my attention that the bus service to hospice has been ceased. It's my understanding. Could the Minister examine this case and report back to the States to ensure that we still have an active bus service for those who need it, going to visit people in hospice?
Deputy, I think that does fall outside the parameters of the question, which is specifically related to the Sandybrook service. But if the Minister wishes to answer it, then I'll allow it, given that.
I'm happy to refer that to Constable Jaillon and his capacity as Minister for Infrastructure. So.
Come to question 3. Oh, I beg your pardon. A final supplementary, Connie Todd St Lawrence.
Yes, thank you, sir. Will the Minister commit to providing a dedicated lease vehicle for patient use, similar to the provision for patients on Cedar Ward?
So we do have budget limitations. I'm certainly happy to look at it, but I'm not prepared to commit to absolutely at this point in time, sir.
Well, we come now to question 3. The Deputy Andrews will ask the Chair of PPC. Deputy.
Thank you, sir. Will the Chair state whether it is her assessment that the provisions of the Commissioner for Standards Jersey Law 2017 mean the Commissioner is compromised or conflicted when investigating complaints submitted about States members involved in the appointment to the Office of Commissioner?
Chair.
Thank you, sir. Candidates for the role of Pan Island Commissioner for Standards were interviewed in February last year. I was part of the recruitment panel, along with the greffiers of the States of Jersey and Guernsey, the chair of the Guernsey States Assembly Constitution Committee, and the chair of the Jersey Appointments Commission as a non-voting member. The appointment was then endorsed by PPC and this Assembly through publication of R21 2023. It is usual practice in other jurisdictions for politicians with responsibility for standards to take part in the appointment process for commissioners, but this does not exempt those members from accountability. Our standards legislation does not provide immunity for the chair of PPC, and neither should it. Like other members of this Assembly, I am accountable for my actions and bound by the Code of Conduct. As it stands, it is for the Commissioner herself to determine if she is conflicted in relation to any complaint. I've spent no time with her alone and have no personal connection with her. I would emphasise that my involvement with her to date has been limited to the hour in her company when she was interviewed, and any additional contact with her has been on the same basis as other members, either on Teams calls with the rest of PPC when reviewing her findings, reports, or when she ran a briefing in November in the Chamber, or when I was interviewed as a witness. In fact, I would imagine that other members have spent considerably longer time in the Commissioner's company while she has been investigating complaints against them. I do not consider that the Commissioner is conflicted or compromised when investigating complaints against any of the 49 members of this Assembly. She looks at the facts of each individual case objectively and treats us all equally in an impartial, fair, thorough and transparent manner. I will not and cannot be drawn into discussions about complaints, particularly any that are ongoing. It is important that the Commissioner for Standards investigation processes are respected and that they remain confidential until the findings are published.
Supplemental question, Deputy?
Thank you, sir. Sir, will the chair of the PPC discuss this with the panel to see whether there is a potential amendment required to the Commissioner for Standards Jersey Law 2017, and if not, why not?
I'm happy to discuss this with other members of the of PPC. Thank you, sir.
Well, we come to question 4 that Deputy Doublet will ask of the Chief Minister. Deputy. Deputy Doublet. Greffier, is Deputy Doublet online? Deputy Doublet?
I think Deputy Doublet has
Apologies,
bad
sir.
connection.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now. Thank you very much, Deputy, if you'd like to ask a question.
Thank you, sir. Will the Chief Minister advise what actions he is taking to address the incidence and impact of economic abuse in the island, a common feature of domestic abuse as discussed in the VOG report?
Chief Minister.
Thank you, sir. As we can see from testimony in the VAG report, financial and economic control is a harmful feature of domestic abuse, as victims not only suffer directly, but the loss of financial control can trap them in an abusive situation. The government has accepted the recommendations of that report, and we will be assessing the prevalence of economic abuse with the intention of making specific provision to address it in the domestic abuse law, sir, if necessary. Thank you.
Supplemental question, Deputy Doublet.
I thank the Chief Minister for his answer. Could the Chief Minister comment on his understanding of the awareness of this type of abuse in the islands, and what does he think can be done to improve the awareness of this abuse so that we can start to prevent it?
Thank you, sir. I think one of the biggest problems society faces with domestic abuse is that we tend not to be aware of it, or tend to be in denial, or tend to think it doesn't happen in our own community. The VAG report was entitled "It's a Hidden Problem," sir. So we can work to bring it to the forefront, so we can address it just by the sort of work we're doing now. And I cite the report of VAG, the way the government and this assembly will deal with that, and continuous questioning, which enables answers to be given in the public domain. Thank you.
Deputy Coles.
Thank you, sir. Does the Chief Minister therefore support a move to independent income support allowances rather than the household versions that we currently have?
I'd need to discuss that with the Social Security Minister to gain her view. In principle, it sounds sensible, but I'd need to understand the details, sir. Thank you.
Have a supplemental to that, Deputy Coles? Deputy Jean.
Thank you, sir. Will the Chief Minister then advise when the full action plan and specific timetables will be published on the VOG recommendations, so that there's this timely implementation of all these recommendations, including the economic abuse one? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. The first report outlining that will be produced at the end of this month, and that will set out the timetable. I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done. There'll be some recommendations that can be addressed quickly, some in the medium term, and some in the longer term. So whilst, and this work is being led by the Minister for Justice and Home Affairs, and whilst we can set out a timeline, I think it's something that's going to be subject to variance as we get to grips with the problem.
Supplemental question, Deputy Jean.
Yes, sir, thank you. As the Chief Minister outlines, there is a large number of recommendations, and we've been made aware that the Chief Executive has advised the Council of Ministers to focus on a few priority areas. Which, therefore, does the Chief Minister believe are the key priority areas within the VOG recommendations to do, and is economic abuse one of those areas to sort out?
I don't recall the Chief Executive referring to prioritisation within the VAG report. The VAG report, the whole VAG report, is a priority for the government and will stay a priority for this government and I hope future governments until all of those recommendations have been implemented. Thank you.
Final supplementary, Deputy Doublé.
Thank you, sir. Given that the numbers of mostly women, but also some men in the island who experience this type of abuse, would the Chief Minister commit to looking at the funding to organisations such as Frida, who provide outreach support and education around preventing this type of abuse, to see if anything can be done to improve those services and further support those organisations?
Thank you, sir. Short answer to that is yes, we will keep funding under review for all these important organisations. Frida do receive government support, and we must make sure that support remains appropriate, not just for Frida, but for all organisations who help to tackle domestic abuse. Thank you.
The next question will be asked by Deputy War of the Minister for Housing. Deputy.
Thank you, sir. Will the Deputy explain what work, if any, was required either of him directly or his department to enable the launch of the First Step scheme in March 2024 beyond the work that had been undertaken within the previous administration?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. The First Step scheme was due to be launched by the end of March, and I was delighted to be able to launch it at the end of February. The actions I took included adjusting the maximum property prices supported by the scheme to ensure that they reflected the actual affordability challenge as it stands today. I personally took part in direct stakeholder engagement with the estate agents, lawyers and mortgage lenders to assist them in being ready to assist buyers. I reviewed and approved the business case and policy guidance for the scheme. And finally, sir, I set the communications strategy, which, at my personal insistence, including recognising the role of my predecessor for the work he did in helping to establish the scheme, and I was pleased that he accepted a direct invitation from me to be included in the publicity when we launched the scheme.
Supplemental question, Deputy.
Yes, sir. On the 6th of February this year, the Housing Minister, in response to a statement on social media that he would decimate Jersey if he became Chief Minister, responded by saying that the only thing I'll be decimating is the cost of housing. Reduced housing costs will result in a fall in property values and negative equity. What measures in relation to the First Step scheme are in place to protect the £10 million invested by the states of Jersey and, more importantly, the well-being and huge investment in their homes made by those participating in the First Step scheme?
So I won't pretend to have understood that question entirely, but what I can say, sir, is that I don't believe for a moment that people who are assisted into home ownership by the support that is offered through the First Step scheme will be anything other than grateful for having been able to benefit from a scheme that will make home ownership for them possible when otherwise it would have been impossible, and I'm proud of the scheme on that basis.
Deputy Andrews.
Thank you, sir. I understand that the Minister is launching a scheme with 3 tranches to support first-time buyers. What concerns, if any, does he have about the rate of inflation and the erosion that may have on the £10 million with the launch of the 3 tranches? Thank you, sir.
Well, so I thank the Deputy for that question, and there's no doubt that the length of time it took to get this scheme up and running from when the money for it was first secured way back in a previous government plan will have meant that because of rising house prices, it will be able to help fewer people than it may have been able to have done if it had been launched earlier. So we have seen through the most recent house price indexes that certain kinds of properties have reduced in value in that time, which has meant that we've been able to review and reset the maximum property prices that this scheme supports. And on that basis, I think it has hopefully provided an opportunity for some people, in particular those looking to get a one-bedroom apartment, that with a scheme like this, that will be more affordable for them than it otherwise would have been and in this moment, it will perhaps be able to help more people than it may have been able to have done a year ago.
Supplemental question, Deputy. Deputy Kovac.
Thank you, sir. What plans does the Minister have to extend the funding for the existing First Steps housing scheme beyond the current budget?
So that will be ultimately a matter for the Council of Ministers and this Assembly, but I've made no secret of the fact that I think this scheme provides a very good foundation for building upon it and hopefully securing more funds in the future to be able to extend it. Those are discussions that I'll have with my government colleagues, of course, to ensure that we can find the most appropriate source of funding for that. And no doubt such a proposal would probably end up back in this Assembly in the form of the government plan, and I would certainly hope if we can demonstrate the success of this scheme this year, then that will provide good justification for continuing it in the future.
Supplemental question, Deputy.
Yes. Has the Minister identified any possible additional funding source to extend this scheme?
No, sir, not directly. The Deputy will recall that I brought an amendment to the government plan at the end of last year as a non-executive member to find one source of funding, but that was rejected. I will have to speak with my government colleagues and I will have to make the case and demonstrate what a success that it's been in the first instance. But I know that many members across the Assembly are gravely concerned at the way that the housing crisis is affecting islanders, and in particular young islanders who are still at the point of deciding where their future is best and whether that will be in Jersey or not. And I hope that I can strongly make the case that we should identify a source of funding to carry it on.
Deputy Coles and Deputy Gardner, then final supplementary. Deputy Coles.
Thank you, sir. Will the Minister describe what success of this scheme looks like and confirm how it will be measured?
Well, sir, I want this to be able to support as many islanders as possible. We have already, sir, had just about enough applications made to us to spend the entirety of the money that was set aside. But I should say that the applications are still open until the beginning of April, so I hope that we'll have more than that. But I think that that is, at least so far, a sign of the popularity of this kind of support mechanism for helping people get onto the housing ladder, and the fact that we have had those applications in a short space of time, I hope is a sign that this scheme is desired by those who it seeks to benefit.
Supplemental question. Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. I'm welcoming the new scheme and to more young people get on the property ladder. How Minister would ensure that this new applicants who would purchase the property and the young family who purchased the properties last year will not get into the negative equity because of the prices going down?
Well, sir, this scheme, of course, won't ensure that because house prices will be determined by a whole variety of issues. Having reflected on the nature of the question that was asked by Deputy Ward earlier and this supplementary which is connected to that, I think my previous comments had been misinterpreted in that, sir, it is about housing affordability, which is not necessarily directly based on the market value of a property, but down to how somebody is supported into that, and through equity loans or shared equity or other mechanisms, which will reflect how much somebody pays on a daily basis for the home that they live in. And that's the matter that I think this scheme aims to support islanders through.
Supplemental question, Deputy. Final supplementary, Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. And it's to follow on from Deputy Andrews' point, and it's an item which was on news yesterday on Rightmove, talking about prices. And it's already suggested that house prices have already moved upwards by 1.5% year on year. And interest rates, although theoretically falling, have actually increased on a 5-year mortgage from 4.64 to 4.84%. Does the Minister not agree that due to his inability to be decisive in not releasing the full £10 million immediately, will result in fewer people being helped onto the scheme?
So I think the response that's provoked from members sat behind me is quite justified. So I managed to get this scheme up and running a month earlier than it otherwise would have done. And I actually called for it to be up and running a year earlier than it could have been done otherwise, because I had been decisive in my election manifesto saying that an equity system was the right use for this £10 million, and I didn't have to waste a year exploring all sorts of different options to conclude that the one we pointed out in the first instance was the right one. That's political decisiveness, and I'm very, very gratified at the fact that this is going to benefit young people into home ownership and show them they've got a future in this island.
I will just pause in questions for a moment because I don't know how long we will have our guests with us. But members may have noticed that in the public gallery there are rather more people than is usually the case for sittings of this assembly. We are joined by students from the Lycée Jacques Cartier in St. Malo who have chosen to specialise in English. And you may think with that specialisation, their presence here is somewhat surprising. However, their curriculum includes parliamentary representation, which is why they've come to watch us here today. And I wonder if members would like to indicate their welcome in the usual way. We continue. The next question is question 6. The Deputy Gardener will ask for the Minister for Justice and Home Affairs Deputy.
Thank you, sir. Will the Minister advise whether she plans to propose an in-committee debate regarding substance use policy, and if she has no such plans, why not?
Thank you, sir. I'm aware that the previous Home Affairs Minister intended to seek the Assembly's views on the decriminalisation of illicit substances for personal use via an in-committee debate to help inform further policy development in this area. I do not intend to propose an in-committee debate in relation to this matter. From my perspective, I am very conscious that we have limited time, finite resources and a very heavy legislative programme which needs to be developed. That includes some very pressing issues, including developing a modern-day slavery law, a hate crime law, a law to deal with stalking, a new divorce law and work to implementate, including amendments to further domestic violence legislation. Members will be aware I have committed to these pieces of work as a priority, and I feel that the Council of Ministers and the Chief Minister do also. I would not be minded to divert resources from these priorities to work on decriminalisation of illegal substances. I therefore feel it would not be right to seek the views of members, knowing I would not pursue further policy development at this point in time.
Supplemental question, Deputy Gardner.
I think it's very clear.
Very well. We come now to question 7. I beg your pardon?
Apology, I don't have supplementary. It was.
You don't have a supplementary?
But maybe other members will have supplementary.
Well, no, I understand how the question system works, Deputy Gardner. It's as if you don't have a supplementary, then that's the end of questions unless someone indicates a desire to ask a question. Now somebody has, Deputy Jean, but that wasn't the case before. Very well. Thank you very much. Deputy Jean.
Thank you, sir, and I thank the Minister for being very clear in her direction of travel. But the substance abuse policy does contain more than drugs. For example, it's about alcohol as well, and the abuse alcohol can have on citizens. So can the Minister advise whether she's given any consideration and the potential impacts of to her department on not taking this policy forward in any way?
Minister.
I thank the Deputy for the question. Substance misuse falls clearly under the remit of the Health Minister, not myself. And obviously it was the previous Health Minister that was the author of this substance use strategy. But the activity, as the Deputy rightly talks about, is alcohol, which is actually a matter for the health as opposed to myself as Home Affairs Minister.
Supplemental question, Deputy Jean?
Yes, thank you. Will the Minister advise, as part of the Council of Ministers, whether she's given any thought into the use of taxes and charges as an effective mechanism for controlling substance abuse, such as alcohol?
At this stage, sir, no, I have not. And we haven't actually addressed this at the Council of Ministers. From my perspective, I think as an island, we need to ensure that we have proper processes in place that we can deal with any substance misuse, regardless of what that happens to be. It is not always about introducing taxes that will actually make this better, and that's why in a recent debate about increasing of GST on alcohol, I was minded not to actually vote for the whole amount, because I do feel as an island that we need to be looking at this more strategically, and it isn't always about raising taxes. And I am aware that there is some work being done by the Health Minister, and we need to be looking at both on premises and off premises in relation to the sale of alcohol.
Deputy Coles.
Thank you, sir. Given now that we have a substance use strategy, and it is very important to appreciate the difference between the substance use and the substance misuse strategy, the fact that our law is still the misuse of drugs law, does that not then provide a conflict between the two strategies and the strategy and law?
Minister?
I'm not quite sure exactly what the question is, sir, and I'd like the Deputy to repeat it.
Sorry, sir, and sorry to the Minister, it probably wasn't clear. With a substance use strategy is aimed to help people stop using substances and the continued use of them. So is criminalisation still the best way to tackle with people who are using substances?
I think we need to look at this as a broad spectrum, sir, because obviously decriminalisation has all sorts of meanings, and that will have something different meaning to all of us, sir. In relation to dealing with substance misuse, this is where we maybe need to focus. We have obviously in recent weeks approved the public order law, and this will have some impact on minor or offences in relation to guidance from the AG being able to deal with first-time offenders in relation to drug use. But this is a very broad piece of work, sir, in relation to both drugs and alcohol, and I think it needs a good, in my view, a good review as to how we deal with it. Because from my perspective, I think that we are at times lacking in our dealing with all of the offences in relation to substance use.
Supplemental, Deputy Coles.
Yes, sir. A person under the age of 18 caught with alcohol will simply have that alcohol removed from him. But somebody who does not have a prescription for medical cannabis will face a fine in parish hall and potential criminal prosecution. Do these two things then not appear contradictory?
Well, I think we're straying outside the proposal for an in-committee debate, and I think I can't allow that question, Deputy. Deputy Renouf.
Yes, sir, before I ask my question, could I raise the defo on Deputy Stevenson?
Yes, defo is raised on Deputy Stevenson.
So can I check that I have understood the Minister's response correctly, and that in ruling out an in-committee debate on substance use, she has also ruled out the chance that the government will bring forward any legislation to decriminalise or remove, to decriminalise cannabis, or does that option still remain open to the government?
Minister.
I think so. I made it quite clear that I have priorities which do not include decriminalisation of drugs. And I think the thing is that we as a government have to make choices. And from my perspective, the legislation which we are bringing forward in relation to the Violence Against Women and Girls Task Force report is a priority. Let's make this quite clear. That is my priority, and it is the priority of the Council of Ministers. The work was done as a result of a proposition brought by the Constable of St Martin in 2021 as part of the government plan. That work has been done, and we have committed to implement it. So from my perspective, that is what we're going to do, and I believe that is what the rest of the Council of Ministers will do. So from this, at this point, we have a very short, finite opportunity, and these are the pieces of legislation that I will be looking to bring forward as the Justice and Home Affairs Minister.
Supplemental question, Deputy Wren.
Yes, sir. I suspect that people who might be sent to prison for possession of cannabis might regard that as a priority as well. I wonder if the Minister would accept that it remains open to the Assembly or members of the Assembly to bring forward this kind of proposition, and therefore that there wouldn't actually be much saving in terms of parliamentary time or government time in dealing with this issue, and maybe it would be better therefore for the government to take a lead.
I hear what the Deputy says in relation to the people in prison, sir, but I think let's be quite clear about this. There is, yes, people in prison in relation to drugs offences. There are also people in prison who have committed offences in relation to drug driving. And that is a piece of legislation which actually could also be brought forward, because at this present time we have good drink drive legislation, but we do not have legislation which makes it easy to actually deal with people who drive whilst under the influence of a substance other than alcohol. So there is much pieces of legislation. So actually it would be, do we bring in the decriminalisation of substance, or do we actually bring in legislation that will bring in line with similar legislation for drink driving? Bearing in mind this week, or last week, the 22 report from the police said that road traffic collisions are going up. And when the 2023 report is released, I would assume that that's going to be the same thing. There is much to do in relation to the policing and the justice of our island, and I think we'll just have to take priorities.
Final supplementary, Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. I'm sure that Minister is aware of the researches and analysis that has been done and found no link between legal policies and high use at the teenagers. Minister stated that it's a drug and happy to continue to criminalise young people using cannabis. Would Minister reconsider to gather States members' views and to have in-committee debate before the proposition will come forward?
Sir, I think it's interesting because it says about criminalising young people in relation to drugs. As I've already said, is that generally speaking, in line with the guidance of the Attorney General, first-time offenders of drug possession are dealt with at the parish hall inquiry where possible. And that comes under the public order legislation when it's implemented. But more importantly, as somebody who spent 25 years dealing with offences across the spectrum, not only substance misuse or use, however you like to use it, is that it is about looking at everything and saying, are we criminalising young people if they go to a parish hall inquiry? And the parish hall inquiry is a system that can be used for all sorts of offences. So it's not only about substance use. And I do think that there may be some concerns with some of our educational establishments, depending on how we would actually deal with this. So from my perspective, at this time, I will not be bringing forward an in-committee debate in relation to this matter.
We come to question 7. The Deputy General will ask the Chief Minister. Deputy.
Thank you, sir. Further to the adoption of P31/2023, will the Minister provide an update on implementation of the requirement for arm's-length organisations and state-owned bodies to publish their gender pay gap and income ratio?
Thank you, sir. Officers have been working recently with arm's-length organisations to improve the standard of their annual reporting. This work includes the publication of gender pay gap and income ratio information. Whilst the proposition referred to in the question only asked the government to encourage ALOs to work towards reporting, we are minded to require it if progress is not being made, sir. and are just working through it to make it as straightforward as possible for the arm's length organisations to implement. So far as the states-owned entities are concerned, they either already report in their annual reports on gender pay gap and income ratios, or will be doing so in their 2023 annual reports, but we'll be watching that very closely as well to make sure they do. Thank you.
Supplemental question, Deputy.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, sir. Could the Chief Minister advise how he will ensure that ALOs and SOBs will publish these reports as soon as possible and in as much detail as possible, specifically for the 2024 reports? As he's indicated, there is already the 2023 reports. And can he indicate it will not, if he will not personally push for this to happen, which minister he will assign to take the lead on ensuring this will happen?
Thank you, sir. Initial discussions with the officials in the Economy and Treasury Departments last week identified, if I'm honest, sir, that we cannot be confident that all of the ALOs will deliver on this request in the publications of their 2023 annual reports, sir, despite encouragement. If that's not the case, sir, then we can require it, sir, by making this condition a condition, sir, of the partnership arrangements we have with the ALOs, sir, when their funding is agreed every year. Thank you.
Well, Deputy Randolph.
Yes, sir. If the reporting reveals significant gender pay gaps, what actions, if any, would the Chief Minister be prepared to take to try and ensure that those pay gaps were closed?
Well, so with states-owned entities and arm's length organisations, there is an element of independence in the way they run their organisations. But I'd hope they would comply with government policy, and we would certainly seek to determine that they do that. So we can do that effectively with arm's length organisations, because, as I say, the government funds them with taxpayers' money, and there are conditions based around that funding. So that could be relatively straightforward, sir. As I understand it, the majority of our states-owned entities, who are slightly more difficult to demand things insofar as they are either incorporated separately and have their own board, sir, but indications tell us, sir, that they are dealing with that quite well currently. But we continue to watch the situation. But I just wanted to reassure members that this government will do whatever we can to ensure the gap is closed in all of the ALOs and the state-owned entities.
Supplemental question?
Yes, sir. Can I just clarify that the Chief Minister was saying that all state-owned entities, including ones with not wholly owned by the states, would be covered by his potential instruction to publish this data in the future, if they do not do it voluntarily?
So there is a clear difference between arm's length organisations, as we refer to them, are organisations such as Visit Jersey, Digital Jersey, Jersey Business, Jersey Finance. States-owned entities are companies incorporated and wholly or largely owned by the taxpayer, and that's the difference. We have more influence over the ALOs than we do on incorporated bodies or public bodies. Companies, I should say.
Deputy Dublé.
Thank you, sir. Does the Minister think it's reasonable to provide some reporting templates and other types of support to these companies to enable them to publish their data?
Yes, so we'd actually discussed that last week in the meeting. The government itself has templates available, and we've asked if they can be shared, if that's helpful. So as I alluded to in the original answer, we're just working through how to make it as straightforward as possible for the arm's length organisations to comply. And we'll work as closely as we can with them to share the information that the government uses in order for that to assist.
Supplemental question, Deputy Dublé.
Yes, please, sir. I thank the Chief Minister for that encouraging answer. And would he consider, and does he think it might help these companies to set a date whereby they would all publish on the same date, so that no one company is exposed at one time in terms of publishing their information?
I would hope, sir, that, well, I've already said we're not confident that all of the ALOs will have addressed this in the 2023 reports, the annual reports, which are due out this year. If they don't, we'll have further conversations with them with a view to getting a full commitment from them. The backstop would be for the government to make it a requirement of their funding arrangements. So the earliest we could do that would be for the annual report 2025. And yes, I would be prepared to put a firm date on that if we don't get the cooperation required. But at the moment, I'd just rather say that I'm confident that we will have the majority of state-owned entities and arm's-length organisations reporting that information in detail, so for the 2025 annual reports. Thank you.
Deputy Stevenson.
Thank you, sir. Given the Chief Minister's comments about the information that is provided and how it may be provided by ALOs and state-owned entities, would he support those organisations being brought under the FOI legislation?
Not with state-owned entities and companies, sir, because there's too much commercially sensitive information. I know that could be excluded. And haven't really given it much thought in relation to the arm's length organisation. So possibly needs more consideration. I'm not totally against it, so but it's something, to be honest, that hasn't even reached the agenda as yet. Thank you.
Supplemental question, Deputy?
Thank you. Could I ask that the Chief Minister gives it some thought and perhaps comes back to this?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Final supplemental, Deputy Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Will the Chief Minister not agree with me that the government's arm's-length organisations and state-owned bodies should be beacons of best practice when it comes to implementing important societal practice and good governance, especially when it comes to clamping down on gender inequality and, I'd like to stress, excessive income ratios that these reports will hopefully highlight?
Yes, sir, I do feel that government organisations should be beacons of best practice, just as I feel this Assembly should be beacons of best practice, and that's why I've tried to make it clear that we're addressing this and we'll do everything we can to comply with the direction of P31. I think it was lodged in June 2023 by Deputy Andrews. Thank you.
Very well. Question 8 falls away because Deputy Moore is malade. We therefore come to question 9. The Deputy Randolph will ask the Minister for Environment. Deputy.
Thank you, sir. Will the Minister state whether he intends to give any consideration to amending the Planning and Building General Development Jersey Order 2008 to allow short-term holiday lets to operate for a set period in each year without the need for planning permission?
Thank you, sir. Sir, I'm pleased to inform the Deputy that my team are building on the work that he initiated and are currently progressing an amendment to the General Development Order which will allow a dwelling to be used for short-term holiday lets without the need for planning permission for a period of up to 12 weeks in any calendar year. The amendment should be in place in the next couple of weeks and will be accompanied by supplementary planning guidance to offer further clarity for the industry and for those who may wish to consider letting their home on a short-term basis.
Supplemental question.
Thank you very much.
Very well. Connie St Mary.
Thank you, sir. Could the Minister clarify whether that will affect the need to apply to tourism for such a licence in the event that the number of people using that residential accommodation exceeds 6 persons?
I have to say to the Constable, sir, that I'm not cited on the answer to that question, but I will certainly find out and get back to him.
Supplemental to that, Connie a final supplementary? Thank you. We then move to question 10. The Deputy Chairman will ask of the same Minister. Deputy.
Thank you, sir. Will the Minister state whether he is intending to develop an energy strategy, and if so, will he provide an outline of his plans and his timeline, and further advise which, if any, other ministers will be included in its development?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. Sir, the Assembly's forthcoming decision on the principle of an offshore wind farm, as well as further ongoing analysis of the whole energy market, will allow me to work towards developing an energy strategy. I'm cautious about committing to specific timelines to the Deputy, as there's currently significant uncertainty, meaning it will take longer to prepare. I fully recognise that this, whilst I might be the lead Minister in energy matters, there's a significant overlap with other key ministerial portfolios. These include the Minister for Sustainable Economic Development, Minister for Infrastructure, External Relations and Treasury and Resources. I absolutely favour collaborative working, and I commit to working with all these ministers, scrutiny, energy suppliers, external stakeholders, including Guernsey, the United Kingdom, France, in this important matter.
Supplemental question, Deputy.
Yes, thank you, sir. Will the Minister outline what steps he will take to ensure solar is a specific part in the energy strategy, and to explain what his preferred option would be, whether to focus on developing rooftop installations or field-based developments, and if not, why?
So solar has a part to play in the future energy requirements of the island. Electricity will clearly be the main source of energy into the future, and how we create that energy will be important. I was a minister some time ago and introduced a 90% permitted development solar on roofs, and I think obviously we can only extend that to 100%, which I think has been done subsequently. I've also served on the planning committee deciding in favour of the first large commercial solar array in St Clements, and I was also on the committee that initially showed some scepticism about the second proposal at Sole Point. But it's clear that solar has a part to play. But while Jersey is a very small island, we do need to be careful about how much solar we put in the environment and in the countryside. But I certainly would encourage anybody who has the ability to put solar on their roofs to do that.
Does the Minister accept that one of the advantages of rooftop solar is that it allows, it encourages members of the public to decarbonise further by being able, for example, to run electric cars off their solar panels, reducing the cost of that element of decarbonisation?
Absolutely, sir. The two main areas of focus which we have to make in the coming years is on transport and on heating homes, especially historic homes. And those are the two places where we need to substitute fossil fuels for electricity. Solar on roofs allows for small batteries to be installed to charge electric vehicles, and it also allows for energy to be put into homes, some of which could well be used for heating, and to then rely less on carbon fuels.
Supplemental question, Deputy Renouf. Final supplementary, Deputy Jean.
Yes. Will the Minister advise if he has confidence in the local energy companies to deliver safe, cost-effective, decarbonised, resilient and secure services for the Jersey citizens?
Absolutely, sir. I think it's clear that Jersey Electricity have for some time now been delivering electricity to the island, which is very low in carbon, good security, good sustainability, and at a price which we've all been very, very happy to pay. I have to say to members that the low prices we've enjoyed for electricity for many, many years now may be coming to an end as general energy prices across Europe push ahead. But it is my view that we've been served well in the past, and I continue to work. I commit to continue to working with the electricity company to make best use of that in the future.
Come to question 11. The Deputy Andrews will ask of the Minister for Sustainable Economic Development. Deputy.
Thank you, sir. Will the Minister provide his reasons for the appointment of the Connétable St John and Deputy Scott as his assistant ministers, and will he advise whether they were the first members he considered appointing?
Thank you, sir. Sir, the appointment of assistant ministers is subject to many influences, limitations and constraints, making it impossible to simplify an analysis of the process to the extent where you could possibly determine the order in which states members were considered. The appointment of ministers, of course, is decided between both ministers and the chief minister. I have always been open to working with all members of the Assembly and was pleased to appoint a strong team whose skills complement the portfolio. The Connétable de St John has a long record, both inside and outside the Assembly, as a champion for sport, and I know he will continue the positive work undertaken by Deputy Stevenson. As Form's scrutiny chair, Deputy Scott brings a strong understanding of the whole portfolio and she has shown a particular drive in improving the island's cybersecurity and inward investment. Sir, also the Constable Sant'Elia is also a natural choice given his parochial role and Assistant Minister position within infrastructure. I hope that together we can all bring forward much needed improvements to the central markets and other places in town, sir.
Supplemental question, Deputy?
Yes, please, sir. Can the Minister for Sustainable Development confirm whether the Chief Minister instructed him to appoint the two assistant ministers or whether it was actually his choice to appoint those two ministers? Thank you, sir.
Sir, I was happy, it was my choice, happily to accept the appointment of the Assistant Minister, sir.
Well, we come to question 12. The Deputy Gardener will ask of the Minister for Education and Lifelong Learning. Deputy.
Thank you, sir. Will the Minister advise the current timeline for introducing updated employment terms and conditions for teaching assistants?
So, thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. The work that's going on with teaching assistants is wider than the terms and conditions work with teachers. It includes a revised framework to include updated roles, modifying career progression, excuse me, sir, a professional training programme, extending the teaching framework scale, pay scale to recognise the increased skills of teaching assistants, and a focus on the impact that teaching assistants have in a positive way within schools and within the classroom. Although that is a wide range of things to do, sir, I am confident that it will meet the timeline that the Deputy is aware of to be completed this year. Thank you, sir.
Supplemental question, Deputy Gardner.
Apology, I didn't hear the end of the answer.
This year. This year. Completed this year.
Sorry, sir, it's because I have a cold given to me by Deputy Kovac. Sorry, sir.
Yes, supplemental question, Deputy Gardner.
Absolutely. Thank you for the Minister stating all points which I completely 100% agree. As a Minister, I have been presented the outcome of this review that was going for 1 year, from January last year to this time, as the teaching assistants were a priority, as they have the lowest pay within the school, and we have the highest problem with retention. The plans were introduced, updated, or at least partially updated, to make sure the teaching assistants would receive extra funding Q1. I understand that it's not happening.
Well, what's the question?
Is it correct that it's not happening in Q1 and it will happen by the end of the year?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. I think, first of all, we have to take the changes and consult with teaching assistants as to whether they agree with the changes before we implement them. I will say one thing, though, sir. I think they're much more likely to be adopted and have a positive impact, given that we now no longer have an industrial dispute within schools. And we've actually settled that industrial dispute for 3 years, showing very clearly as Minister and as a government that we value our education staff. And rather than sending divisive letters, we will actually work with them to improve their terms and conditions, value their place in the workplace, and value their role within our schools. So I'm confident that with those combination of factors, the money will be there at the right time for the right reasons to make the right changes. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Wilson.
Thank you, sir. I think the Deputy may well, or the Minister rather, may well have just answered the question, but I would like to ask him whether or not if he could confirm if funding is there to support the teaching assistant pay conditions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. The funding from last year's government plan did not have detail as to how it was going to fund the changes that come from the terms and conditions, because they weren't completed. What we will need to do, sir, is look very closely at the implications for funding of those terms and conditions changes and what is needed. So that is investment in schools, and I'm confident that when that investment is required, it will be taken on board, because that's going to improve our schools. I think we do have an emphasis in the importance of our education system, and I certainly would want to continue that.
Supplemental question, Deputy Wilson.
Thank you, sir. Could the Minister outline how long he envisages this the result that he anticipates. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. The target is that everything's in place by September for teaching assistants. Yeah, September.
Very well. Deputy Coles.
Thank you, sir. Will the Minister also commit to looking at the terms and conditions of all support staff within schools, and that comes down from the caretakers to the welfare support officers?
Yes, thank you, sir. I really do thank the Deputy for the question, because I think sometimes we forget the importance of the other people who work in schools beyond teaching assistants and teachers. And certainly caretakers, and I learnt so when I was teaching, always be on the good side of the caretaker if you want something done. But certainly, sir, they take an important role in the combination of supply of provision within our schools. They are also civil servants on the same civil servant pay scales, and certainly so I believe that is something that needs to be looked at. What I would say about the role of caretakers is that I think they were mixed up before in job re-evaluation that was not particularly successful for them the last time this happened. And again, that's another repair job that we're going to do in education so that they are valued within our schools. And I would take the opportunity, sir, to say that I do definitely value those people who make sure our schools are running effectively day in, day out.
Supplemental question, Deputy. David Renouf.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. It is indeed excellent news that the government has been able to settle the teachers' pay dispute. Is the Minister confident that the situation with regard to teaching assistants will not lead to any further disputes between unions and government?
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir, I'm as confident as I can be. I think we have managed to reset trust to some extent that was being lost in the education profession over the last 2 years and beyond because of the industrial dispute that was happening. And we have a clear line of dialogue. We have a clear line of value for our profession. And I think that cannot be underestimated. And I think that gives us an opportunity and a window of opportunity to say to staff, look, we want to move forward together. And the process that's been ongoing, what I am very pleased about the process is it's included teaching assistants and representation from their trade unions, so that there's a direct representation from the people on the work face, so to speak. And I think that's the way to get buy-in and commitment, and to lower the potential for industrial action. Those things only happen, I believe, when that dialogue isn't there and the wrong decisions have been made. That's certainly what happened before, and I'm really hoping so that that won't happen again.
Supplemental question? Final supplementary, Deputy Clerk.
Thank you, sir. And I do congratulate that the industrial dispute has been finished. The teaching assistant got around the table before any other pay group and education. There was extensive consultation with very high engagement that was presented in December. Is it any way that the decision and a possible money allocation within the inclusion growth that were marked to meet the terms and conditions can be done earlier, or teaching assistants actually need to get on strike because they were patient for too long?
So I'm looking at the timeline for implementation that the Deputy would have seen in a presentation about 2 months ago. And the implementation there is in September, with in early July, emails sent to all staff with confirmation, a new role and a copy of the revised job descriptions that they would have agreed in June and during May. So there is a process in train. It's not about saying there isn't the money here to do this and so therefore there will be industrial action. This is about developing the role of a teaching assistant. It's become more important over time, improving paying conditions where necessary so that we can retain staff. And I think so there's an understanding within this Council of Ministers that retention and recruitment is one way to ensure that money is spent effectively and we're getting the services that we need, and those services are valued and have a value long term. So I'll say again, I'm going to say it every time I stand up in this assembly, we need to view education as investment, not cost, because the return from every well-educated person on this island is significant for us as an island. And if we don't get that right, it's going to cost us a lot more in the future. Thank you, sir.
Very well. The question, we've just seen a model of members of the public leaving the States Assembly in almost total silence, which was very impressive to watch it from the chair, may I say. We come to question 13. The Deputy Doublé will ask the Minister for Social Security. Deputy Doublé. Deputy Doublé. The Deputy did indicate she may have some difficulty in asking this question, so we'll that question falls away, and we come to question 14. The Deputy Southern will ask the Minister for Treasury and Resources. Deputy.
Thank you, sir. Following the decision of the Isle of Man government to raise income tax by 2% in order to raise funds for improvements to their health service, will the Minister detail what sources of additional or alternative taxation, if any, she has under consideration to meet the increased demand for services in Jersey? Or are current tax policy discussions based on an assumption of future reductions in services?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. I thank the Deputy for his question. Sir, the new government's first proposed government plan for 2025 to 2028 will be lodged in the summer and will set out our spending plans and income forecasts for those coming years. I do not consider that we face a binary choice, as the Deputy's question implies. The government plan will also set out ongoing and any new tax policy reviews, but I can say that I do not currently envisage the need for Jersey to follow in the footsteps in the Isle of Man in this way.
Supplemental question, Deputy.
Thank you, sir. And whilst the Minister might say there is no binary choice, in fact, is she not saying she will not be looking at new taxes or increased taxes, she will be looking at reductions in services one way or another?
Sir, no, I absolutely do not agree that that's the case. It's not a matter of we either increase taxes or we reduce services. Government has put, we have put additional support into health, additional funding into health for some time, and since 2020 there has been additional budget allocations for HCS of 19.3 million over and above any allocations for pay, non-pay inflation and additional growth allocations. We will, however, continue to look for real efficiencies that help manage public sector costs while improving services. The Isle of Man's proposal is in fact temporary, and they are to some degree following Jersey by introducing an additional tax in much the way we did with long-term care contribution, and the Isle of Man are working on developing a standalone annual NHS levy in the way that we have an LTC contribution, and that will ultimately replace the tax increase. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Renouf.
Yes, so if I could move away from the idea of cuts versus taxes and instead focus on the, I think, the acknowledged requirement for greater health spending in the future as the population ages and we have upcoming dementia strategies and so on. And I wonder whether it causes the Treasury Minister any worry that we have a relatively narrow tax base in Jersey with all the taxes focused on, nearly all the taxes focused on income and expenditure through GST, and whether she considers that there might be a case for considering broadening the tax base by looking at other taxes other than just income tax and taxes on spending.
Sir, the Deputy is quite right in that we are reliant on income tax rather more than some other jurisdictions. But our tax mix is not unusual for an international finance centre, and that contributes substantially to our overall tax revenues. Additional taxes could impact significantly on the international competitiveness of the finance centre, and introducing those types of taxes are not being considered by the government. Corporate income tax revenues will increase with the introduction of the Pillar 2 minimum effective tax rate for the largest multinational groups from 2025. And we, to some degree, do need to wait to see what the impact of that tax will be. There is ongoing work regarding both, it does, he will be aware, it does cause me a significant amount of concern that we are looking towards an increasing proportion of our population being older. Work is already underway in terms of what we do with that, both with the Future Economy programme and also the sustainability of healthcare funding. And work has been ongoing for over a year and a half under the previous health minister, and is now being continued to look at both what our healthcare needs are and how those will be funded going forward. And I think an assessment of need is necessary before we then move forward. Thank you, sir.
Supplemental question, Deputy Renouf.
Is the Treasury Minister ruling out any potential tax increase, broadening the tax base in any way at all, through, for example, capital taxes on second property sales or any other measure that might raise money in the future to bridge those funding gaps?
No, sir, I'm not ruling anything out, but at the moment I am still discussing with my team tax policy objectives and what we need to do in terms of tax policy. You know, we've discussed already this morning increasing taxes and duties on alcohol to deal with misuse, but that's a very difficult balance. Do you increase tax to address the health lobby at a time when there's a cost of living crisis? So there are very difficult balancing measures. There may be other things we do, but those will come forward in our next government plan. Thank you, sir.
Final supplementary, Deputy Sutton.
Yes, a previous government promised that they would transfer the burden of taxation from businesses to individuals, and they have successfully and obviously done exactly that. Is it not time for the Minister to take a fresh look at taxation and rebalance business taxation with individual taxation in order to give individuals a bit of a break at this time?
Sir, I'd remind the Deputy that we currently have a income tax threshold of £20,000, which is one of the most generous among comparator jurisdictions, and our personal income tax rate remains low. People in Jersey are paying significantly less income tax than people in the UK. And when I say UK, I have to again draw out that people in Scotland pay even more tax than people in England. And in both cases pay significantly more income tax than in Jersey. They pay significantly more VAT than GST. Corporate tax will change with the introduction of Pillar 2, and we do have to remember, of course, that 010 again was developed to promote and ensure the competitiveness of our International Finance Centre, which is critical to our economy. So I do not have immediate plans to look at business taxes, but as I said previously, nothing can be ruled out, but it is not on the table at the present date. Thank you.
Well, that ends the period of questions with notice. We come to questions without notice. The first period of question for the Minister for Infrastructure. Deputy Stevenson.
Thank you, sir. Can the Minister confirm that the £1 million budget agreed by this Assembly in the government plan for new skate parks in 2024 remains in place? And can he give his assurance that this will not be reprioritised and the money diverted elsewhere?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. Thank the Deputy for her question. So my understanding is that some £300,000 of that £1 million is being spent on the £2 million at Llanelwedd with the provision of floodlights and doing something for the facility. I'm pleased to report that later this week I'm due to meet with the Constable of St Clement to look at potential sites in St Clement. I've contacted other constables to see if they've got sites for satellite skate parks, but the intention is to build more facilities using that money. Thank you, sir.
Supplemental question?
Thank you, sir. And the remaining 700 and I think £50,000, can he give us assurance that that is going to remain in place, and will the focus on a town skate park continue?
So the focus is on providing satellite parks, not just one park. Members may be surprised to know that we've got the largest skate park, I'm told, in Britain, possibly in Europe, at Llanelli. It's a fantastic facility which is really well used. What we've got to try and do is provide facilities for people who don't live in the west of the islands, who haven't got time to get out there and back again, and so that's what we're trying to do, perhaps provide 2 or 3 smaller parks rather than another large park. Thank you.
Deputy Wall.
Thank you, sir. I thank the Minister for his answer to my written question 70 in connection with the poor state of South Hill Gardens. In his answer, he says, initial proposals for restoration of South Hill Park and Llanelli Gardens were developed in 22. These have not been developed further due to a lack of available funding. Can I remind the Minister that in an amendment to the Government Plan 23-26, under Head of Expenditure for Infrastructure, Rolling Vote and Regeneration, this will include preparatory work for St Helier, urban renewal work, including after par, with additional funding of 300,000 in 24, 350 in each of 25 and 26. Can the Minister explain why some of that £300,000 budget for this year cannot be spent on Llanelli Gardens?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. I thank the Deputy for his question. The Deputy will be pleased to know that I walked around South Hill and Llanelli Gardens only on Friday with officers and saw the destruction that was caused by Storm Ciarán and the general wear and tear of that area. So the officers are looking at what we can do on a short, medium and long-term basis that will need funding, but we're also going to look at how we can engage with the community, and I hope to attend the next HOVDIPAR meeting to try and see if we can get some volunteers to get engaged in some work up there in the immediate future. Thank you, sir.
Supplemental question, Deputy Wall?
No, thank you, sir.
Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. Would the Minister update the Assembly about progress made for the playing field for the First Tower School?
Minister.
Thank you, sir, and I thank the Deputy for her question. And the Deputy did ask me this question, so as soon as I got elected, what was happening. So I'm keeping abreast of the situation at First Tower. There's ongoing discussions, sir, with the owner of a field with a view to providing external play facilities for the primary school that currently has very limited outside space. The owner is seeking an agreement that will allow him to retain and develop some of the fields and allow the remaining space to be used for educational purpose, playing field, play space, outside teaching and learning. At the moment, the negotiations on the ratio of space for development and space for the school facilities have yet to be concluded. So as you would expect, both parties want the best for their cause. And I hope that we can conclude discussions in the very near future. Thank you, sir.
Supplemental question, Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir, and thank you for the Minister for his answer. Just to raise that this negotiations going with the owner of the field from September 2022, and I would welcome the conclusion as quick as possible, because this particular field was allocated in the Bridge and Island Plan for the education development. Can the Minister give the estimates if we are looking into 3 months, 6 months or another year?
So it's difficult to give an estimate. I will give the Deputy some assurance that it will be quicker than the playing field at St John that took over 20 years to be created. So I think what's important is that we get the right decision. Yes, it needs to be done in a timely fashion, but we need to make sure we get the right decision, and I'm constantly talking to officers about the progress. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Jean.
Thank you, sir. Will the Minister explain the accountability framework for the hospital project? Which accountable officer is responsible for the build, and to whom does the new project team report? Would this be the accountable officer for infrastructure or the accountable officer for HCS?
Sir, the hospital project comes under the Health Minister remit. I believe that currently the responsible officer is the Chief Officer of Infrastructure, but I would need to get clarification from my colleague on that point.
Supplemental question, Deputy Jean.
So as Infrastructure Minister, what oversight, if any, does he have?
We're working closely together. I'm part of the risk group, the ministerial risk group. Clearly, we'll have heavy involvement in any traffic plans that come forward to any changes to traffic. I was involved with the move of Samaray to St Ewolds, and I'll continue to work closely with my colleagues on the project and see it through.
Deputy Renouf.
Thank you, sir. I think the Minister is aware that the fields at Le Creux have recently been handed back to the Natural Environment Department by the tenant farmer who was previously farming them. Does he agree with me that this represents a tremendous opportunity to develop the country park that currently threads through those fields in a manner that would benefit use of the community?
Sir, I thank the Deputy for his question. Another site that I visited recently, the Friday before actually, and was absolutely surprised at the amount of space at the Bowls Club, for example. Sir, I'm familiar with Le Creux as it's somewhere that I walk my dog at weekends with my wife. Sir, I think that we have to look at Le Creux as a whole. I think we can do a lot more with Le Creux than has been done in the past. And when the Deputy talks about the community, I think there are two communities we need to look at. We need to look at the St Blards community and also the island community. So I believe we can provide far more recreation there. I think we need to do far more with the pump track, etc., as an example. I look forward to working with the local deputies to find solutions.
Supplemental question, Deputy Renouf.
Yes, can I thank the Minister very much for that positive reply. Could he clarify what the situation will be with regards to the income expected by government from those sites? We're currently, the farmers used to pay rent on those fields. Will community uses also be required to pay rent for those fields? Were they to be developed, say, for community gardens or such like?
So we have two responsibilities. We need to get our assets to work for us, and we need to provide assets for the community that are affordable. So, sir, it will really depend on what we do with the site. The clubhouse at the Bowls Club does not work hard for the island, and I hope that it can work harder for more islanders going forward. So I think the answer to the question is too early to say. It will depend on what facilities we place there, and we need to make facilities available to islanders, but if there's any commercial operation, they will need to pay a commercial rent. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Kovac.
Thank you, sir. Given the current schools we can see are crowded, especially in the parishes that are taking children from the town's area, does the Minister still support on having a town school provided as soon as possible, and also increasing the play area in schools that we've seen is not existing?
Thank you, sir, and I thank the Deputy for her question. Sir, schools are provided by Jersey Property Holdings, which are part of my department, but it's actually the Education Department who lead on this piece of work, with the property team working closely with them and other stakeholders. Sir, from my time on the State Employment Board, I'm aware of some of the limitations of the existing primary school estate, and although we're working to ensure that those schools are safe, they have some serious shortcomings, whether that's outside play space, access, drop-off and collection facilities. The provision of a new school would allow a brand new facility that meets modern standards to be positioned in the heart of the catchment area that would benefit greatly from this. It would allow the creation of more green space, would fit into a sustainable transport and green route plan across town, and could facilitate the linking of up to town with the eastern cycle networks. So we have to look, a lot of work has been done by our predecessors. We need to look at that quickly and fairly, and I'm going to be working with my colleagues, not only from Education, but also Home Affairs Minister, to get to grips with the issue so we can line up the decisions that will provide education with the facilities they need and allow Home Affairs estate to be addressed. Thank you, sir.
Supplemental question, Deputy. Connie Tarberson, Mary.
Thank you, sir. Following recent adverse publicity about the state of the roads in the island, does the Minister believe he has sufficient budget to cater for requirements to renovate where necessary? And further, would you also consider allocating additional funds to individual parishes to enable them to more speedily attend to problems on their roads caused by recent storm damage?
Sir, the first part of the question, sir, is no, we don't have sufficient funds. Sir, there is just under £6 million allocated each year for resurfacing, and we need to spend around £8 million a year so that we can keep up with that resurfacing. In addition, just over £600,000 is planned for pothole maintenance. So when it comes to parishes, sir, my own parish, we have £10,000 additional spending this year because as a result of Storm Ciarán, and I'll be going to my ratepayers to ask them for sufficient funds to repair our roads in the parish of St John, as I'll be coming to the Treasury Minister to ask for more funds to repair the 265 kilometres of road that come under the state's ownership.
Supplemental question, Greta? Deputy Wilson.
Thank you, sir. Could the Minister confirm if the planning applications for the development of the ambulance station in Roosbouillon School will be submitted together?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. Thank the Deputy for her question. So we are looking at the whole site. We are due to meet in the next 2 weeks, I believe, to look at what we're going to do at that site or sites. And I would imagine that will be coming, if they're not together, they'll be very quickly following one after the other. But clearly we'll need to explain what we're going to do with one site whilst we're working on the other. So it may make sense to bring them together. It's just about capacity of the staff, whether we can do that. We don't want to delay bringing one first, so we'll bring them as soon as we can, sir.
Supplemental question, Deputy?
Thank you, sir. Could the Minister advise how soon we could expect a decision on those, please?
So I'm not in a position to do that today. We still have got some work to do. What I don't want to do is to make a commitment today that I'm not able to keep. What I will do, sir, is speak to officers and I'll try and get back to the Deputy with an indication of time frame and I'll circulate that to members. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Aye.
Thank you, sir. Now that the Minister is determined to repay certain people for building over the foreshore, is he consider repaying all the other people who were charged in a similar vein? Thank you, sir.
So the payments that were made to 2 individuals for historic infractions were done so because of the length of time it had taken. So I took the time to read the complaints panel review, and I also took the time to read the review that was done by Deputy Baloch on behalf of the previous Minister before I came to my decision, and I came to my decision on having read those 2 reviews. Thank you, sir.
Supplemental question, Deputy?
Thank you, sir. Could the Minister advise the Assembly of the total amount of money received in fines for people building outside the curtilage of their property onto the foreshore? Thank you, sir.
So that's not a figure I have to hand. So the majority of infractions have been dealt with by licence, and I believe that's the way we will do moving forward. I will try and find that figure out for the Deputy and circulate it later today. Thank you, sir.
I'm afraid that brings the period of questions for this Minister to an end. Just to remind members, my policy is to allow anyone who has not yet asked a question to ask a question before I call upon those for repeat questions. Very well. The next period of question is for the Minister for Social Security. Any questions for that Minister? Deputy Porre.
Thank you, sir. Has the Minister had any opportunity to look into the current provision of period products, and does she consider that the scheme is now working? Thank you.
Thank you, sir, and I thank the Deputy for her question. No, I don't consider that the scheme is now working in a manner that I would wish it to. I have met with the team responsible for implementing the scheme, and I've asked them to improve it. One of those first improvements that I've asked to happen as swiftly as possible is the changing of the current dispensing units, which are in public toilets. Further work that will be undertaken by the team is some focus groups with groups of women to find out what they need from the scheme and how we can use the money that we have allocated to the scheme in the most efficient and effective way.
Supplemental question, Deputy Murray?
Sir, I thank the Minister for her answer, and I would like to share with the Minister that and ask her if she is aware, as she's going to look into the scheme with a bit further, with fresh pair of eyes, if she is aware of any misuse of the free products provided in public spaces, such as, for instance, situations where youngsters have been seen littering the streets with those same products, which I have both been informed by members of the public and I have seen it myself. And if the Minister intends to continue the scheme, would she intend to look at this particular situation I am informing the Minister of, to make sure that products are not wasted and they're not used unreasonably? Thank you.
Minister.
Yes, I am unaware of those unfortunate circumstances involving vandalism and misuse of products, and this is one of the reasons why I have expedited the installation or the request for installation of different dispensers which should prevent that kind of behaviour from happening as it currently is.
Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. I thank the Minister for her answer to my written question 71 around payments for carpets, which I found, to be honest with you, deeply disappointing, as I'm sure many tenants did too. Andium Homes replace carpets in around 400 tenancies every year. That's at least one home every day of the year. Does the Minister not agree with me that every day she and the Housing Minister delay over making a decision as to who pays for carpets, an increasing number of our most vulnerable islanders find themselves deeper in unsustainable debt, and it's yet another reason as to why we have seen a 168% rise in the use of food banks?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. The Housing Minister and I have not delayed making decisions as to who pays for carpets. One of the first things that I did was ask officers to extend the current provision as agreed by the Assembly for grants to be made available to tenants at Andium. And indeed, myself and the Housing Minister met just last week to discuss this issue and to ask officers to action this by having further conversations with Andium around how they can provide carpets directly to tenants.
Supplemental question, Deputy Wall?
No, thank you.
Deputy Jean.
Thank you, sir. With charities stating that in 2023 they experienced 55% increase in demand for their services, yet had a 57% drop in fundraising income, and therefore as a result in 2024 more than a third have forced to scale back activities and over half are surviving only by using their reserves, can the Minister outline her plans on how she will be supporting charities to deliver their services, and as this is a concerning development, explain if she is assigning specific responsibilities for charities to an Assistant Minister to ensure a strong focus, and if not, why not?
Minister.
Because this is such an important focus, I will not be assigning responsibilities to an Assistant Minister. I wish to retain responsibilities for this and the disability strategy myself because it is a priority for me. I have commenced meeting with members of the charitable sector, and I have also met with the chair of the Jersey Association for Charities, and I have accompanied the Chief Minister on visits to certain charities to discuss with them what specific needs they have in relation to funding.
Supplemental question, Deputy Jean?
Yes. Thank you, sir, and I thank the Minister for her explanation and the fact that she's already exploring with charities how best for them to deliver services considering their stretched resources and funding. But how will could the Minister explain how not only in her ministerial plans supporting charities, but how she will champion the importance of consulting and listening to the third sector as part of other ministers' delivery plans?
I am committed to working collaboratively with all ministers, and just as I have made visits to relevant charities with the Minister for Housing and the Chief Minister, I will be inviting other ministers to attend relevant meetings with me so that we can work collaboratively to find the best outcomes.
Deputy Sutherland.
Thank you, sir. What consideration, if any, has been given to the possibility of payment of income support components in arrears rather than currently in advance?
I thank the Deputy for his question. At this early stage, that is not something that I have considered, but I will put that on my list to consider.
Supplemental, Deputy Sutherland.
Yes. Supplementary, is the Minister aware that this issue is closely linked to the issue of overpayments? Overpayments could be almost, I believe, certainly halved, but perhaps eliminated if she were to move to in arrears rather than in advance.
Yes, I am aware that this issue is related to the subject of overpayments. I am also aware of the review that was undertaken by the previous scrutiny panel, and I have set aside time in my diary to go through that review and its recommendations with the relevant officers.
Deputy Stevenson.
Thank you, sir. Social Security student credits are currently only available for a total of 3 years. Does the Minister believe this is sufficient, considering some students will study for 4 years or longer? And what does she think does it encourage young people to come back to the island afterwards?
I would be in favour of extending student credits to encompass those 4 years. I have to admit I wasn't aware that it was limited to that 3 years, so it's a subject that I will look into and change as required.
Supplemental question, Deputy Stevenson.
Thank you, and I'm very encouraged to hear that from the Minister. Can I request that as part of her work to look at that consideration is also given to the part that this plays on lifelong learning, because the 3 years is in the course of somebody's life, so it can be taken in blocks. But of course, if someone's done one degree early on and then chooses to retrain earlier, is that a commitment that the Minister can make to consider lifelong learning as well?
Yes.
Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir, and I think it seamlessly continue the high education. Would the Minister advise if she was aware about group of women at Highlands courses who were largely single moms and with great determination had returned to education, largely to degree courses, and as the recipients of income support, Social Security insisted that they worked in the holiday periods, which make their childcare unaffordable, and some of them left education.
Minister.
I wasn't aware of that specific set of circumstances, so if the Deputy would like to raise that with me outside of the chamber, I'd be more than happy to look into it and see what I can do.
Supplemental question, Deputy.
Thank you, and I also encouraged by the Minister's answer. Would the Minister indicate if she feels it's unfair to people who were making a great effort to improve themselves and make the open education opportunity to not be able to progress because of the funds available for single moms?
My understanding is that there is current provision in relation to critical skills courses, but I am happy to look at whether that provision should be extended, because I understand that we as an island need to foster and develop people, and we have a commitment as well to supporting lifelong learning, and I would be more than happy to work with the Minister for Education and Lifelong Learning in that respect.
Deputy Kovac.
Thank you, sir. I'm grateful to the Assembly that last year has passed the additional support for babies in neonatal care and the funding support for medical hosiery and wood dressings, which are both to be delivered in 2024. Can the Minister give us an update of the work progress on this, please?
I was disappointed on taking office to see that work hadn't commenced on those two items, and I have instructed officers to prioritise the decisions of the Assembly as they were made last year and within the government plan debate. So I have asked them to expedite the delivery of those specific two projects.
Supplemental question, Deputy?
Yes, related to the support for medical hosiery and wood dressings, I understood from the officer speaking during the progress of my proposition that we should see progress with it within Q1, which is now. How soon we should expect to see this scheme in place?
This project I have outlined as one of my key priorities to my officers, and I have asked the team to look at whether they can bring in a short-term solution, which means that wound dressings can be provided free of charge while they consider a more longer-term sustainable process. So I will update the Deputy as soon as I have a time frame for that.
Deputy Renouf.
Thank you, sir. On the question of overpayments that were mentioned earlier, does the Minister accept the point made by the Treasury Minister in, I think, a hustings speech, in which she said that if overpayments were not going to be demanded back, then the cost would have to be borne by the Social Security Department?
I think one thing that we need to consider is whether the overpayments were the result of an administrative error or they were because somebody hadn't declared a change of circumstances. I would like to have a look at what we do in relation to overpayments, which are a result of an administrative error, because at the end of the day, the current income support legislation is incredibly complex and difficult to understand. And it is quite possible that people may have been receiving funds that they weren't eligible for through no fault of their own, and they would have had no way of knowing that they weren't eligible for those funds. I think we need to be realistic about that, and I think that we need to take responsibility for the issues that may arise as a result of that.
Supplemental question, Deputy?
Yes, in that taking of responsibility, my original question was, would the costs be borne by her department, or would she be going to the Treasury for extra funding?
The income support budget is budgeted on the amount of income support that is thought to be payable during a year. Therefore, I would be seeking to look at how we could use the income support budget to remedy the issue around overpayments that may have been caused by administrative error. But we shouldn't be seeing overpayments being caused by administrative error, and it is my intention to look very closely at the root causes of that and to try and simplify our income support system.
Deputy Sutherland.
Thank you, sir. What attention has the Minister or her officers paid to the role of maintenance payments in the application of income support components?
As usual, the Deputy is one step ahead of me, and I haven't actually got to looking at that particular subject in my first few weeks of office, so I will need to do that. But I will give the Deputy some comfort in that I have asked and requested for a copy of the current income support guidelines, and I will be going through those guidelines with a fine-tooth comb.
I'm afraid that brings the period of questions for this Minister to an end. Final period of questions is for the Chief Minister, Deputy Coles.
Thank you, sir. Given the recent disclosure in the House of Commons regarding the Home Office's unlawful actions against Jersey Hemp, what support will the Chief Minister be providing Jersey Hemp going forward?
Chief Minister.
I'm not sure, sir, because I'm not fully au fait with the current circumstances regarding Jersey Hemp's legal position or potential legal or litigation with the UK government. So I'd have to refer to officers, but members and the deputy will know, sir, that I have been supportive of developing a hemp and medicinal cannabis industry. So I'd hope any actions would align with those, with that stance, sir.
Supplemental question, Deputy Bowles.
Yes, sir. Will the Chief Minister commit to reporting back to the Assembly as soon as possible?
It depends on the circumstances in relation to the legal situation that's going on, but if I can, sir, I will. Thank you.
Deputy Kovac.
Thank you, sir. The Jersey International Cultural Centre has been nominated and shortlisted for the DeFera Award as the Best Government Initiative for our important work on valuing and bringing the communities together. As its work has been paused for this year so far, what are Chief Minister's current plans with the International Cultural Centre?
Thank you, sir. I am currently considering the options for the International Cultural Centre, and will still need to have some discussions with members, but will likely be bringing that to a forthcoming Council of Ministers meeting, sir, to determine what exactly we're going to do with it. So, and there is a potential option to push responsibilities for that excuse me, into external relations and international development to work alongside that, sir, or we simply could leave pretty much as it is, sir. But I have to say, sir, we're still undecided and still reviewing the potential, sir, and also the future budgeting. Thank you.
Supplemental question, Deputy?
Yes, please. No matter where it would be moved, as this project was a response to the recommendation of the Diversity and Inclusion Forum review report, can the Chief Minister assure the Assembly that with the right governance in place, the budget for this project and its activity will continue?
No, sir. Being honest, I can't guarantee at this stage. There's a budget of £300,000. Will remain available. That's going to be subject to further discussion. But I want to reassure members that I consider the work carried out by the International Cultural Centre, sir, and all work that government and the Assembly carry out in a similar vein, sir, is very important, sir. So we will ensure there is a support for that line of work to continue.
Deputy Ayer.
Thank you, sir. Since we are discussing later P10 cash payments at government sports facilities, will the Chief Minister advise the Assembly whether cash payments will be able to be made at the new government building at Bailiwick House when it opens later this year? Thank you, sir.
Chief Minister.
No, sir, I can't. The Minister for Infrastructure is helpfully nodding his head at me, so I'm going to say yes, yes, we can.
Supplemental question, Deputy Ayer. Deputy Stevenson.
Thank you, sir. The Chief Minister put out a statement on social media this week in which he talked about prioritising essential services and tackling the most immediate challenges facing islanders. Of course, very laudable aims there. It then went on to talk about reprioritising work in order to pay for that. What level of reprioritisation is being targeted, and can he provide some examples of what projects will be cancelled as a result? I think we've heard that the town skate park might be one of them.
I'm not sure whether the Deputy has heard that from, so it sounds like a speculation. Ministers are currently getting a good understanding of the current government structures, how and where the budgets are being used, sir. But we do have a number of crises in this island. Cost of living and housing, sir, are just two. What I am aware of, sir, that the government tries to do too much, and we are going to look at areas that we consider are not essential and reprioritise that spending. Work is currently going on at that. The decisions we make on that, sir, will be the lead in the corporate strategic policy, which is currently being developed, and that's a work in progress. So we hope to lodge at the beginning of April.
Supplemental, Deputy Stevenson.
Sir, I don't believe that the Minister answered what level of reprioritisation is being targeted, what amount. that was part of the original question.
Are you able
I
to
mean-
answer that, Chief Minister?
Well, we haven't come to that final figure yet. As I said, it's a work in progress, and it's important rather than me reel off figures off the top of my head. We're doing some proper research into it. The Council of Ministers is gaining a good understanding of where money is spent. But as I said, that information will be available when we have finalised the corporate strategic plan and launched it. But of course, I would remind members, Common Strategic Plan, when it's lodged, sir, will spend some time in scrutiny, and of course it is open for members to amend. But I said, just to repeat myself, so it's absolutely clear, we're working on that information and we will provide the detail when we have it.
Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. In his answer to the Constable of St Helier on the 27th of February, the Education Minister used the term falling apart whilst referencing schools in St Helier. Could the Chief Minister explain what he believes his minister meant by that term, and could he reassure parents that the safety of their children is not being compromised?
Yes, sir, and the Education Minister and I have visited a number of primary schools and are visiting some more this week. And I think, I'm sure he used that term, sir, to signify to States members that some of these schools need renewal or need repairs and constant maintenance. But I can reassure members that there are no safety concerns at those schools, largely because the staff at those schools take their responsibilities extremely seriously, sir, and are on top of that situation. But some of our schools are becoming no longer fit for purpose, and we have to make sure we have a plan in place to address that situation when it arises.
Supplemental question, Deputy Ward.
Yes, sir, thank you. Does the Chief Minister believe that the budget to maintain schools that are falling apart is sufficient, and what is his response to the view that the infrastructure of these schools is being deliberately left to decay so as to ensure that a new £34 million school will be built on Gas Place despite demographic evidence that this investment may not be necessary?
Well, sir, it's absolute rubbish to suggest that a tactic of this government or any member in this Assembly would allow schools to decay and put children at risk, sir. And that's all I'm going to say about that.
So is that statement not impugning the motives of those involved?
Well, I took the view that whilst coming perilously close to it, it was a matter of an immediate rebuttal from the Chief Minister, and it seems to me that the moment has passed for me to do anything about it. Well. Deputy Wilson.
Thank you, sir. Could the Chief Minister state what activity is underway with to develop collaborative working with our neighbour Guernsey? And can he explain which specific areas of work he would like to take forward with them?
Sir, I can let members know that I had a private meeting with the Chief Minister of Guernsey at the weekend. It was an informal meeting, Guernsey Linden and Jersey Linden, as we call ourselves now, so there's no confusion. And we have agreed to meet more formally later this year to discuss key matters of interest. I hope that will happen in the early summer. Officials are in touch with Guernsey now, planning to arrange that. And the areas we have touched upon are areas of key importance to the Channel Islands, such as our constitutional relationship with the UK, Lifeline, ferry links, and other issues where we can be closely aligned in order to benefit both islands. Having said that, we also, whilst we need to work closely wherever possible, we should also celebrate our differences wherever ever possible, sir. And I think on those lines we're going to move forward very well together. Thank you.
Supplemental question, Deputy.
Thank you, sir. Could the Chief Minister explain whether or not some of these discussions will be revealed as part of the next update to the government plan? Will you be incorporating some of the schemes or some of the ideas that you will be agreeing with Guernsey into this year's government plan?
Well, so I'm sure some of the discussions will align with or fall into priorities as listed. Did the Deputy say Common Strategic Plan or Government Plan?
Government plan, I think.
Government plan. Where funding is required or related, then the outcomes of those conversations could have an impact on the government plan, depending on what they are, sir. Thank you.
Deputy Alex Curtis.
Thank you, sir. Under the Control of Housing and Work Law, the regulations state that an islander not born on the island must be on the island continuously for 30 years to achieve permanent entitled status. And this is causing many islanders to forego longer holidays or sabbaticals off island. My question is, will the Chief Minister look to review this to ensure islanders pursuing permanent entitled status are able to take trips off island?
I'm not totally familiar with the details of that, but I'll take the Deputy's word for it because he is very well read on this type of detail. So he's happy to have a look at that, so make sure that it's appropriate in line with requirements of a modern society.
Supplemental question, Deputy.
Thank you, sir. Briefly following up, I'm glad to hear that from the Chief Minister. The regulations are specific that an islander who wishes to have permanent entitled status to allow them to leave for longer periods must be continuously resident for 30 years. And so I would reiterate and look forward to the conversation and ask if the Chief Minister will involve the wider Assembly in reviewing the regulations.
We can review those regulations. I think we can do that relatively quickly in-house. And if we deem that it's necessary to change the legislation, then of course we'll involve the wider Assembly. Thank you.
Deputy Gardner.
Thank you. Probably it's one of the easiest questions, sir. Would the Chief Minister join me in congratulating the new First Minister or Welsh once again for his successful election?
Well, yes, I'd happily join Deputy Gardner in that, sir, and at the same time recognising the tremendous work of Mark Drakeford, the former Chief Minister of Wales, who has stepped down after a long period of service to his country. Thank you.
Do you have a supplemental there?
Yes, follow the engagement with Guernsey. Would Chief Minister consider also more extensive engagement with Welsh, who has very progressive policies, I know, especially in early years and education?
Well, sir, the short answer is yes, and the forum, we often collaborate with the other members of the great British family through the British Irish Council. And I look forward to the next meeting of that, which I understand is the Isle of Man, where I very much hope to meet the new Welsh Chief Minister and the delegation so we can start to cut discussions in areas of mutual interest. Thank you.
Deputy Chair.
Thank you. Could the Chief Minister explain how he will marry up his desires to develop the local medical cannabis industry, but at the same time not spending time exploring with the States Assembly the decriminalisation of cannabis? Does that mean that he agrees that if you can pay large fees through a doctor, you will not get a criminal record, but those that can't afford paying for legalisation will?
Well, firstly, sir, I'm not sure that the Deputy knows my position on legalisation of cannabis, because she might be referring to the Home Affairs Minister's answer this morning. In relation to the process of an in-committee debate, I align myself with the Home Affairs Minister's views this morning, because we have 2 years to deliver a very busy schedule. But of course, that doesn't stop any backbencher or any other member of the Assembly for bringing in a States debate, in-committee debate on that very issue. I'm reserving my judgment on that, because I am undecided and I would need to listen to the evidence of an informative debate before making a decision, sir. But decriminalising cannabis, for example, for personal use, is not related to the medicinal cannabis industry. They are two separate parts. And I'm pleased to say that the Minister for Sustainable Economic Development now is responsible for that brief and is working with the industry to move it forward. I was party to establishing the industry in my former role. Thank you.
That brings the period for questions to the Minister to an end. I'm afraid we're simply time limited, Deputy. That's what the standing orders provide. Very well, that ends question period. There's nothing under J and K. We move on to public business. The first item is scrutiny panel constitution, minimum size, P94 lodged by Deputy Andrews. The main respondent is the President of the Scrutiny Liaison Committee, and I ask the greffier to read the proposition.
The states are asked to decide whether they are of opinion to request the Privileges and Procedures Committee to bring forward before December 2024 the necessary amendments to the standing orders of the States of Jersey, A, to permit a scrutiny panel to operate with fewer than 3 members, no longer than the states meeting following a reduction in the number of members of the panel to fewer than 3, and B, to require the election of a scrutiny panel chair at the next states meeting following the dissolution of a scrutiny panel.
Deputy.
Thank you, sir. I was reading the Democratic Accountability Subcommittee report, and this is a report that was published last term. I think it was Deputy Mezek, Deputy Gorst and Deputy Morell were on the panel. And the panel came up with a series of recommendations, including the constitution of scrutiny and also looking at the constitution of the executive function of government as well. Now, one of the recommendations for scrutiny was recommendation 21. And that was to implement changes to standing orders to require that there be a minimum of 3 persons sitting on a scrutiny panel. There was also a second recommendation, and the recommendation was to get rid of the cap of members that can sit on a scrutiny panel. So at the moment, a scrutiny chair can elect 5 members to the panel, and the Democratic Accountability panel recommended that there should be an unlimited number of members on a scrutiny panel. Now, I happen to disagree with that stance, because I think you could end up with some panels having, say, potentially 9 or 10 members, and others having about 3 or 4 members. So I think we need to make sure that scrutiny is well manned, and we can see at least a baseline of 3 members sitting on a panel and up to 6 members sitting on a panel as well. So when we look at standing orders, we can look at, say, the planning committee. For instance, a chair can elect up to 3 politically elected representatives, up to about 9, I think. So we've got a maximum of about 10 members who can sit on the planning committee. And I think that approach is inconsistent, really, when we look at, say, the scrutiny function, where, you know, okay, we've got a maximum membership, but we don't have a minimum membership. And I think that is the reason, really, why standing orders ought to be updated. But it's also about giving the opportunity for the public to be represented by a number of different individuals, hence why a scrutiny panel will be set up to hear the array of different views of the members who are sitting on the panel. And also it's to provide objective and constructive scrutiny, because as members will be aware who have been in the non-executive before, it can be very demanding, and even since the reconstitution of the Assembly recently, on one of the panels I'm sitting on, we have so many work streams that we need to be involved with for this calendar year, sir, and there are 4 of us on the panel, and I have actually been thinking myself we could probably do with 1 or 2 additional persons joining the panel, because it will be very demanding alongside our constituency work as well. That will also have to be of priority, sir. Now, I think it's important that I do mention, with my own experience, looking back at, say, July 2022, and I remember it was the 19th of July, in fact, to be very specific, sir, and scrutiny was being constituted. And I remember the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel, we only had 3 members, and one of the members, in fact, was reluctant, but they said, look, I will join the panel, but it was due to the fact that we were unable to recruit a 3rd member. And that was more or less a short-term fix. However, the individual knew the importance of ensuring that a panel had at least 3 individuals on the panel to cover the workload. Now, I remember at that sitting, I decided to join the Economic and International Affairs panel and the Corporate Services Scrutiny panel. However, I received two emails from other scrutiny chairs, both saying, would you be able to join my panel? And I did say yes to the Public Accounts Committee because, again, I realised there was only two members on the panel, one being the chair and there was also another ordinary member. But in the end, I decided to turn down the fourth panel due to the fact that I was already on 3 panels and I was going to be overburdened, and in fact I happened to be overburdened. I don't think it really did me any good having to work on 3 panels like that for quite a prolonged period of time. But I remember when we finished the sitting, the chair, who did happen to ask me if I would be joining their panel, and once I did turn them down, they ended up only having a panel with themselves and one other person. So they were constituted with 2 individuals. And really what we ought to be seeing here is a change in culture. We need to be understanding that our constitution is all about us working as a collaborative assembly, and hence we can look at the horseshoe of how we sit. And this is something that the States Greffier also spoke about initially when I first joined the Assembly. It's about working together and working as a team. So it was a bit concerning and disappointing, I have to say, when that one panel came away from the Assembly constituted with 2 individuals. And I think it was at the next sitting we saw somebody else join the panel. But I think there could potentially be some concerns in terms of, say, if situations do arise that members might want me to cover. So, for instance, I spoke to a former politician, and they spoke to me about their experience on scrutiny. They were part of a 3-person panel, and unfortunately, one of the members was poorly and was basically unable to attend any private meetings or public hearings. So in essence, what was happening for about a year, just over a year I think it was, there were only 2 members on the panel. However, the panel remained constituted with 3 members because the member who was absent still remained part of the panel. However, they were not attending meetings, as I just alluded to earlier on. Now, I think in those situations, what I'd really be asking for is members should step forward in those situations when, for instance, a member is unable to continue working, because, again, it's about making sure that scrutiny is fully manned and that we do have a sufficient number of individuals to constructively look at the work streams of the executive. Because, again, when we have serious legislation that is coming forward, we need scrutiny to be robust. And I think if a scrutiny panel happens to be too diminutive, then that can really affect the quality that we see on scrutiny panels. And also I think that the executive are not being challenged as best as they potentially could be in those situations. Now, I also think as well, sir, it's important that panels who preside over, say, sub-panels do have a role in addressing issues as they do arise. So if, for instance, we have, say, 1 individual who is on a scrutiny panel, or if there's maybe 2 individuals, there needs to be an intervention at that point in time. So if we're looking at, say, the PPC, or if we're looking at, say, the Scrutiny Liaison Committee, it is really up to them to get involved, to understand the situation, and to provide the chair with the support they need, so then we can actually re-establish a fully constituted panel with at least 3 members. Now, I think all the proposition is asking is that we are able to address the situation in a 3-week period, and I think 3 weeks is absolutely adequate enough. What we cannot do is we cannot set this dangerous precedent of having, say, essentially 2 or 1 individuals on a scrutiny panel. When you look at, say, the non-executive function, there are 28 politicians, and really we should be seeing all members be part of scrutiny. And I know that was a recommendation in a report that was published. I don't think it should be arbitrarily implemented, but I would say, sir, that there should be enough people to form scrutiny panels and also sub-panels as well, sir, because the whole point of the panel or a committee being formed is so that those individuals can carry out work. And we do need to ensure that the workload is covered and the scrutiny provided is robust and of good quality. And I do have concerns if we do see, for instance, only one or two individuals on a scrutiny panel, there is not going to be the challenge that, say, other scrutiny panels will have internally, where we can challenge one another. And I think there is a real danger where, for instances, where panels happen to be rather diminutive, where politicians can be steering their own political agenda through the panel as well. So it's very important that the panels are able to have individuals who are capable of thinking independently, but also it's about challenging one another to provide the best possible outcome, sir. So thank you very much for allowing me to speak, sir, and I propose a proposition.
Proposition seconded?
Yes, sir.
Any member wish to speak on the proposition? Deputy Scott.
Thank you, sir. Sir, the potential for states members to abuse power or process should be a concern for all states members. It is important that a scrutiny chairman's powers are not abused. I can imagine a situation in which the power of a scrutiny chairman could be abused by appointing only a single crony as another member of that scrutiny panel, despite other states members expressing an interest in that panel, simply to avoid challenge. I also have personal experience of the challenges of running a scrutiny panel with just 2 members, owing to an unfortunate and unusual situation where states members resign from my panel at different times for different reasons. Early on in performing my role as chair, I was informed by a former chair of a history of resignations from that particular channel that I was chairing, owing to the breadth and technical nature of its work, a matter that the Deputy has acknowledged. With other backbenchers having committed themselves in terms of time to other panels and committees, or not having an interest in the panel's work, despite my reasonable endeavours, I found myself having to move forward with just 2 panel members. The process of personally speaking with potentially available backbenchers to request and solicit interest in the panel took me more than the 3 weeks between state sittings that the Deputy contemplates is adequate time to find replacement members. I'm pleased to be able to assure members that the panel's work nevertheless was supported by highly competent and professional scrutiny officers, part of whose task is to ensure impartiality and appropriateness in the conduct of panel members. Furthermore, thanks to considerable effort on my part, the panel's output in terms of written questions of ministers, which has an advantage in being transparent, exceeded that of all other scrutiny panels combined at the time. With my experience in mind, I cannot support this proposition. It risks the situation where, due to unforeseen circumstances, there could be no scrutiny panel, particularly as there are difficulties in making scrutiny panel membership for backbenchers compulsory. The proposal for compulsory membership does not have widespread support, despite the recommendations of the Democratic Accountability and Governance Sub-Panel. States members can look to the Code of Conduct should they feel concerned about an elected scrutiny chairman unreasonably excluding states members who wish to join his or her panel. Perhaps to avoid unfortunate situations that may arise from personality differences between a scrutiny chairman and a scrutiny member, a proposition could be brought and the PPC might give consideration to making mediation compulsory as a first step. In the meantime, I will be voting against this proposition for the reasons given in this speech. Thank you, sir.
Does any other member wish to speak? No other member wishes to speak. Deputy Coles.
Thank you, sir. I just want to rise because I'm not quite so carte blanche as not to support this proposition, but say actually that I agree with Part A, very much so, in the fact we do need better stabilisation of panels, because there's an issue when you have only 2 members on a panel, that if one member is sick, you are then no longer quorate, and therefore hearings have to be cancelled at short notice. This puts a lot of stress on time on officers, both within the GREF and within the ministerial offices. We want to show prudence and effective use of our time and resources. So by having a minimum of 3 membership to the panel, I think is actually very, very important. So that's why I very much would support Part A. I do have slight issue over Part B, in the fact as a member of PPC and has sat on the Machinery of Government scrutiny panel, which is actually looking at some of these functions, that actually the time being issued with this time constraint straight away, I feel is a bit handcuffing. And I do hope that the member does bring this in parts so that I can support Part A, but just to let him know that I will not be supporting Part B.
So another member wish to, Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. This is about scrutiny panels, so it's not any sort of party line. And I've got to say that, unfortunately, Part A will inevitably lead to Part B. And there's an issue for me with Part A, which is, it suggests that, so what could happen if there's an issue within a panel of 3 members, a personality issue for whatever reason, then the 2 days before a state sitting, the member can resign, dissolve the panel, and it can manipulate scrutiny in that way and have it used for personal vendettas, for example. And I don't think that's the way we should be doing scrutiny. I think this opens us up to real issues. And I think any decision like this should be made, sir, by the Parliamentary Procedures Committee, because that's why we have them, and via SLC. I would like to see, I was expecting some comments from Scrutiny Liaison Committee of some form. I know it's short notice, but we've all had things in short notice where we've produced responses, and we have to do that, because I think that's where this should be coming from. A combination of the Scrutiny Liaison Committee, which is the chairs of every panel, and the Parliamentary Procedures Committee. Because what we're looking at here is, and there's a contradiction, I've got to say, sir, in some of the things that have been said, in terms of saying it's very difficult to be on a number of panels, but at the same time, we're going to make sure that every panel has to have 3 members. So we either make membership compulsory, or we're going to have a problem that some members of this Assembly will be on 3 or 4 panels. You can't have both. And what we've got here is an uncoordinated approach to what we want to try and do. The notion of having 3 members and above is a good idea, I get it, but it's got to be workable, and how are we going to do that? And that's about expectation of us as parliamentarians. Are you expected to be on a scrutiny panel if you're not part of the government or executive, call it what you will? If that is the case, that needs to come from PPC, and we need to understand that from day one. In terms of scrutiny chairs and the panels themselves, there's an enormous amount of work that goes with the scrutiny panel. That needs to be understood. The support is good from the officers in the GREF, sir, and I've always appreciated that when I've been involved. But I have a problem with the way this is worded and the consequences that will come from it. Because what we will have is the possibility of, over the period of a few days, a member saying, well, I'm not going to be a part of that panel, I can now dissolve the panel and we can come to the Assembly the next day. And groups could get together, perhaps groups with declared interest with each other, or those perhaps who don't have declared interest publicly with each other, but meet behind the scenes to put together the chairs of the panels that they want in order to control scrutiny and misuse it. We have to be really careful that the checks and balances are in place for that. Because we do have, sometimes, I believe, not open politics on this island in terms of the links behind the scenes. Some of us are very open about our politics and our parties because it's there and we're registered. I wish others would do that, and then this might be a bit clearer as to where we're going. But that doesn't exist at the moment. So at this point, I cannot vote for this because it's worded inappropriately, and the consequences of it could be profound for scrutiny and what happens in this Assembly. We've been through difficult enough times. We don't want this being acted out in scrutiny as well, and I'm very concerned that that might be the case. So I'm afraid I cannot support this.
Deputy Gardner.
Well, it's one of those paths that I really so pleased to follow Deputy Ward. when we work together in scrutiny. I think we hold very similar views. As a president of the Scrutiny Liaison Committee, I'm responding, but I would express my opinion as well. This work is extremely important. We do need to look at the constitution of the scrutiny panels, and I completely accepted recommendations of the Machinery of Government's report from the previous term, which I was also a member of. This work falls between PPC and SLC. We need to work together, and we would work together. It's important to recognize that Machinery of Government subcommittee needs to be reconstituted and it needs to start to work. SLC just been constituted and we have our first meeting next week. I completely understand Deputy Andrews, and I did have a conversation yesterday with Deputy Andrews about his frustrations that things didn't progress over the last 4 months since he launched the proposition. Saying this, for the last 2 months, we all know where we've been. So I do have a sympathy about let's just make a decision. From other side, I'm worried, and I shared with Deputy Andrews my concerns. One of the things that I remember from me being a scrutiny member of the review panel, I have a specific review panel in my head, when we were 3 members, because we needed to be 3 members, and only 2 members actually did the review. And the 3rd member appeared when we have final draft report to be signed off. And it's progressed it needed to be extended for the next X weeks because the 3rd member didn't agree with what the 2 members did over the whole review. And I think this is one of the situations where we have 3 members, but actually 2 members did the work and the 3rd member didn't join and stop work progressing. So it's one of the examples, but it is a concern. Then we are pushing people, say you must be on the panel, or you need to be on the panel, or you have to be on the panel, because we need the numbers, and actually 2 people, capable people, can do the work. Saying this, I'm not saying that recommendation is not correct. We need to look into this. My concern about also the 3 weeks. What happened if in 3 weeks' time we will not have a member who will join the panel? Does it mean every 2-3 months, or 4 months, or 6 months we'll have panel dissolved and we'll have the new elections? So I would think about longer period to appoint the 3rd member if we would decide to go this route to make sure that we address this. So personally, there is no part, everyone votes how the person thinks. I'm worried about unintended circumstances, and as a president of the Scrutiny Liaison Committee, I can commit that I would be working with the chair of PPC to look and progress on that work, but unfortunately, this time I cannot support it.
Deputy Gardner. PPC has briefly looked at the makeup of scrutiny panels in relation to the recommendations from Jennifer Long, who conducted the review on members' pay. And who suggested that everyone who was not in ministerial government should be part of the scrutiny panel. And it's very true that this is work for our panel to carry on with. We looked at it briefly with our last panel, and we had a reconstituted panel yesterday. We had our first meeting, and I'm happy to continue this work with the chair of SLC. So this is work that we really need to look at in depth. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? Comment Iverson Brillard.
Thank you, sir. With the experience of having been on scrutiny panels for many years and watched the variation in the compilation of them and their membership, I think the less interference, the better. Some panels will work better with fewer members, some with more, and it all depends on the subject matter on the day. And effectively, some of the sub-panels which are formed under the umbrella of the principal scrutiny panels are operated with very few people, but they deal with the subject matter in an efficient way. So whilst we can always improve on the situation, I think we have to allow for personalities to take charge of the compilation of the panels, and leave it to the elected chairs, and they are elected on the day in the outset of a government, and leave them run the panel how they wish best, and not interfere. So that's my contribution, sir. Thank you.
Mr. Konatab, does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? No other member wishes to speak. I close the debate and call upon Deputy Andrews to respond.
Thank you, sir. I'd just like to take the time, sir, to thank everybody for their contributions to this debate, sir. I think it's quite important that I just reinforce the point that if a scrutiny panel does happen to see a reduction in its membership, the panel would be given 3 weeks. I know one member spoke that it would imminently fall if that was the case, and that's the reason why I would not allow the proposition to go forward before the Assembly, where potentially we could be seeing such abuses occur. Now, I totally understand the point that was raised by the President of the Scrutiny Liaison Committee in terms of it could set a dangerous precedent in the Assembly. Now, I think as it happens, most scrutiny panels, if we look back over the previous assemblies, have seen scrutiny panels be formed with at least a minimum of 3 members, if not more. So if this does happen, as we have seen by history, it is a very rare occasion that it will happen. And I think what should be done if a case does arise where we see a reduction in membership from 3 members, say, down to 2 or potentially 1, then we need to see involvement with the presiding panels who ought to be involved, and they have to really speak with the panel chair and see what action, if any, ought to be taken. Now, I think it is important to also note as well, most of us we are all, of course, politicians, but most of us are only doing this as our sole income. Some politicians may have, say, secondary income sources, such as investments, etc., but really we are dutiful to represent the public. And the public do expect us to put together scrutiny panels that are capable of carrying out the work that is required of us. And in order to do that, we do need numbers on scrutiny panels, and I don't think it should ever be an issue where we see a shortfall of members on scrutiny, because again, if you're looking at that being an issue, then in essence, it is a repudiation of a politician's duty in turning down an offer to join a scrutiny panel in that situation, sir. So I think I'll leave it there, and I must say thank you to everybody who's contributed, and I will take both A and B separately, sir. So thank you.
You take A and B separately? Very well. The first vote is on Part A. Those in favour of adopting Part A?
The appel, please.
The appel is called for. I invite members to return to their seats. The vote is on Part A of the proposition. And I ask the greffier to open the voting and members to vote. Members have had the opportunity of casting their votes. Then I ask the greffier to close the voting. Anyone voted in the chat? The Part A has been defeated. 8 votes pour, 35 votes contre, no abstentions. The vote then is on Part B.
Sorry, sir. May I ask, does Part B not fall away now? Sorry, I'm just asking, but
No,
I might be wasting everyone's time.
You
It's
may
not
be right.
right, it's fine.
Well, it could theoretically stand alone because it simply says when a scrutiny chair is to be elected, and that's following the dissolution of a panel. But,
I think there's something in standing orders already for that, sir. Is there not? I'm
afraid.
I might be wrong.
No, it's all right. Might have been faster if we just voted, but...
Sorry, yes.
No.
I withdraw.
There is no time limit in standing orders, so the greffier advises me. I'm afraid I didn't have that information at my fingertips. The vote, therefore, is on Part B. I ask the greffier to open the voting and members to vote. Members have the opportunity of casting their vote. I ask the greffier to close the voting. That part has been defeated. 6 votes pour, 35 votes contre, 1 abstention.
May I have the 6 and the 1, please?
Those voting pour, Deputies Morel, Mezek, Wall, Feltham, Stevenson and Andrews, and Deputy Porre abstained.
Well, the next item is the draft Children and Civil Status Amendments Jersey Law, P104, lodged by the Minister for Children and Education, but to be presented by the Minister for Children and Families. The main responder is the chair of the Children, Education and Home Affairs Scrutiny Panel, and I ask the greffier to read the citation.
Draft Children and Civil Status Amendment Jersey Law 2000, a law to amend the Children Jersey Law 2002, the Marriage and Civil Status Jersey Law 2001, the Marriage and Civil Status Jersey Order 2018, and the Interpretation Jersey Law 1954, to provide for the status of children conceived by artificial insemination, the rights and responsibilities of those who are parties to agreements leading to the birth of those children, and for connected purposes. The States, subject to the sanction of His Most Excellent Majesty and Council, have adopted the following law.
Minister.
Thank you, sir. I would like to propose the draft Children and Civil Status Amendments Jersey Law. Sir, this is a complex piece of legislation that has been a long time in development, and I'm pleased that we are finally debating it today. Many families in Jersey have been waiting patiently for this draft law to be debated so we can begin to deliver the changes that will make a real difference to their lives and families. The desire to amend the legislation to provide expanded provisions for the acquisition of legal status and parental rights has been around for some time. Back, whilst debating P77 2015, same-sex marriage, divorce and dissolution, this Assembly noted, in amending the law to allow for same-sex marriage, consideration should be given to matters relating to parental responsibility for a female same-sex couple who are either married or in a civil partnership at the time at which one of them becomes pregnant or gives birth, a male same-sex couple who are either married or in a civil partnership at the time at which a child is conceived or born using the sperm from one of them. Furthermore, in response to recommendation 5 of the Independent Jersey Care Inquiry, a gap analysis was carried out to understand where the island possessed gaps in terms of its legislation for children. The gap analysis stated, new provisions will enable same-sex couples to obtain parental responsibility for their children automatically. Step-parents will also be able to enter into a parental responsibility agreement. Parental rights for same-sex couples are not guaranteed under the current law. Sir, these two admissions provided the original impetus for the work that was commenced by Deputy Mezek when he was Minister for Children and Housing back in 2018. In addition, we cannot ignore the repeated calls for the law to be changed by same-sex couples themselves, and I praise their persistence and patience in continuing to campaign for the simple yet fundamental right to be a parent recognised in law of their own children. The draft law, if approved, will implement a number of long-standing policy intentions, namely, it will enable civil partners to acquire legal parental status and parental responsibility in the same way as a married couple. It will enable same-sex parents to be both registered as a children's legal parents and therefore named on a Jersey birth certificate for the first time. It will enable, as far as possible, same-sex parents to be automatically conferred parental responsibility. It will provide the power for the court to make parental orders for Jersey-born children. It will provide for retrospective recognition of a parental order granted by a court in England and Wales. It will also provide for the acquisition of parental responsibility by a step-parent by agreement or by order of the court. The draft law achieves these effects by making significant amendments to Part 1 of the Children's Jersey Law 2002. This part governs who has parental responsibility for a child. Amendments will expand the application of provisions within this part of the law so that same-sex parents are able to acquire parental responsibility for their child without the need for a court order or adoption order for the first time. Part 1 will also be amended to introduce parental orders, enabling this type of order to be made by the court in Jersey for the first time. This will enable couples, both same-sex and mixed-sex, who use surrogacy to become legal parents of their child in Jersey for the first time without having to adopt their own child. The other law that is significantly amended by the draft law is the Marriage and Civil Status Jersey Law 2001, specifically Part 5, that provides for the registration of births. Again, this part is amended by the draft law to provide for an expanded range of provisions that will for the first time enable same-sex female couples to jointly register and appear on the child's birth certificate. The amendments will also remove the customary law assumption that the husband of the birth mother is the father of the child. Therefore, married mixed-sex couples will register the birth of their child under similar provisions to those that currently exist in the law. However, the father of the child is registered as the child's father rather than the husband of the birth mother. Provisions are also inserted so that parental orders will be registered in the same way as adoption orders. The law will also require that a parent order certificate is produced. This certificate will closely resemble a birth certificate to reduce any stigma as far as possible. I look now at the UNCRC. In 2014, the UK's ratification of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, known as the UNCRC, was extended to Jersey, and we became part of the UK state party for that purpose. Since 2014, this Assembly has been on a journey to progressively realise children's rights here in Jersey. In doing this, a number of children's rights will be furthered in a significant way. I shall outline the most significant of those rights. Article 5 of the UNCRC states, "State parties shall respect the responsibilities, rights and duties of parents. For a state party to fulfil this article, it must first facilitate the acquisition of these responsibilities, rights and duties by all parents. The proposed draft law will enable that acquisition by all parents for the first time." Article 7 of the UNCRC states every child has the right to be registered at birth, to have a name and nationality, and as far as possible to know and be cared for by their parents. As acquisition of legal parent status is not possible for same-sex couples, or in certain circumstances mixed-sex couples, Article 7 is infringed upon by the 2001 law as currently enacted, as one parent of a child is denied from ever acquiring legal parent status for that child. Again, this law will resolve that issue. Article 8 of the UNCRC states every child has the right to an identity. Governments must respect and protect that right and prevent the child's name, nationality or family relationships being changed unlawfully. Family relationships are a key part of a child's identity. It is important that Jersey's law facilitate the acquisition of legal status that underpin these family relationships for all children. Article 18 of the UNCRC states, both parents share responsibility for bringing up their child and should always be considered what is best for that child. Currently, under Jersey law, it is not possible for both same-sex parents and certain circumstances mixed-sex parents to acquire legal parent status. It is therefore not possible for both parents to share full responsibility for making important decisions concerning the upbringing of their child. And with regard to secondary legislation, whilst this Assembly, I hope, will approve this draft law today, I want to make the Assembly aware that this is not the end of the road. Secondary legislation must be produced and brought before this Assembly to make the numerous wide-ranging consequential amendments required and to alter and equalise how the legal concept of legitimacy is applied as a result of the draft law that we will vote on today. Rules of the court must also be produced and brought before this Assembly to govern the parental order process. I have been assured by officers that are working on both of these matters that they will come before the Assembly before the end of the year. Sir, I would like to propose these principles and ask members to support this legislation. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Are the principles seconded?
Yes, sir.
Does any member wish to speak on the principles? Deputy Gardner.
Yes, I'm welcoming this law coming to the debate, and hopefully it will be adopted by this Assembly. The Minister mentioned several people who put the contribution to this one, but I think it's important to recognise that this law would never progress if it would be for Deputy Dublé constant campaigning. Deputy Dublé was shortlisted and was recognised for developing and lodging a law making same-sex parents' rights equal to mixed-sex parents, and as well her passion and dedication, and she tenancy, and shortlisted for the FERA Award this year, and she does deserve this recognition. As my assistant minister, she worked tirelessly and completely independently to make it happen, and I wish standing orders would allow for assistant ministers to bring proposition on their name, because this was her proposition, even though it lodged on the name of the Minister for Children and Education. So I would like to congratulate Deputy Dublé and thank for the current Children and Family Minister not stopping this and presenting this to the States. And I hope, really hope that the Minister, as he presented, fully committed to bring secondary legislation. There is this term. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Hull.
Thank you, sir. I urge members to support this proposition for all the reasons that the Minister has given. It has been causing much anxiety to some of my parishioners. And I thank also, as well as Deputy Dublé, I thank Deputy Mezek and all the ministers who've brought this, carried on working towards this, and I urge us all to vote for it. Thank you, sir.
Does any other member wish to speak on the principles? Deputy Mezek.
Thank you, sir. Like previous speakers, I want to speak strongly in support of this and thank the work of the current minister, but also those who came before him as well for their contribution. And of course, it was noted that when I was Minister for Children, I published the children's legislation programme, which included this on it, which at the time I felt so strongly about doing so because, and let's be clear about this, this is a matter of justice, because for far too long a section of our community have been treated as second-class citizens and in some instances with outright hostility and prejudice, and enshrining equality for them in the law is absolutely fundamental and will help our entire community continue the progress that there is still to do in advancing equality and full human rights for LGBTQ+ people. And that is a struggle which can never be taken for granted, and where we see advances come forward like that which is proposed today, we often see those who prefer to stoke up tensions or distract from their lack of answers on economic issues to fight culture wars to distract us. Those struggles continue, and it's why it's so important that we have motions like this to support and put into Jersey law to make it clear that as a legislature we believe in full equal rights for that part of our community and will stand up for them as a matter of justice. And so I'm very pleased to be voting in support of this.
Deputy Stevenson.
Thank you, sir. And as others have said, I stand up to absolutely support this 100%. And I think, as others have said, the dedication and the time and efforts that have gone into this work by so many people, officers and politicians and others, campaigners outside of those areas as well, is really important. It's something that I remember very fondly from my time at the JEP, obviously not necessarily the subject matter because they were campaigning for a reason that they wanted to see changed, but I was given the privilege a number of times over many years to interview people living in our community who this was, part of their everyday life, including Jersey's first surrogate parents and others same-sex couples who had children who shared their own experiences of the realities of what is still the current situation, including having to go to the UK family courts to be given the right to be a parent to your own child and to spend an hour in the company of a social worker being observed to check that you are eligible to be considered a parent to that child. So I absolutely welcome these changes. I would also just flag up this point that it's very welcome that we now see fertility treatment, because of the nature of what's being discussed here, being considered and the implications of that, which can sometimes be very complicated for heterosexual and same-sex couples. We're talking about it more. Officers are understanding it as well and the implications of it. We're seeing wording around fertility treatment in legislation. I think that's very encouraging. As you can imagine, I hope that's not the last we see of it as well. And I think that this is the beginning. It's a very important one and it's been a long time coming, but I'm sure it has flagged up other areas along the way where we can make improvements as well. And I would just, off the back of what Deputy Mezek had said around other areas where we do need to improve equality, fertility treatment and access to it for same-sex couples is one of those. They do not have the same rights as heterosexual couples currently. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to start by thanking the scrutiny panel, the Children Education Home Affairs Scrutiny Panel, for their excellent report SR2 2024. I think one thing that it highlighted was that the numbers involved actually are very, very low. And the volume of this law is almost disproportionate to the problem that there is as I see it. One thing I would like to understand, so I'm never particularly comfortable with a draft law suggesting that guidelines will follow. And so we're approving the law, but we don't know the detail, and inevitably the devil is in the detail. So we wait with almost apprehension as to what will come next. There are particular issues over whether or not trans-identified men are going to be classed in law as mothers under this, or whether trans-identified women will be classed as father. And I hope that guidelines will enable members of the public to establish exactly what the truth is, in fact, in law behind this, because the document itself is pretty heavy going, sir, and I don't think it can be reasonably expected for members of the public to absorb it perhaps as we do. So, sir, while supporting the process, and I wouldn't wish to compromise children in any shape or form who, by their own, not by their own doing, find themselves in a situation, with same-sex parents. We have to support this, but watch carefully what comes next. Thank you, sir.
Conor St Martin.
Thank you, sir. I was delighted to hear what Deputy Stevenson had said, and that she took away some of what I was going to say, so I'd just like to underline what she said and reiterate it. And I'm very grateful to Deputy Doublé and Deputy Mezek and fellow States members and all who campaigned for this and the officers. I know it's been a long time coming, and I know that today it'll make a lot of my, not a lot, but there's some of my constituents, parishioners will be very relieved today and very happy. So I'd like to thank all involved and say that I'm delighted to support this. Thank you.
Deputy Ferry.
Yes, thank you, sir. And as Assistant Minister, I would like to say a few words in support of these principles. Firstly, I'm fully behind the principle of the draft law to provide legal parent status and parental responsibility to same-sex couples. As the articles of the UNCRC show us, having legislation that enables Jersey to facilitate the retention recognition of all parents in law furthers our recognition and implementation of children's rights. Why should it be that same-sex female couples are only able to be legal parents of their child after undergoing the full entirety of an adoption process, even when one of them is biologically related to that child? Why should the child of a same-sex couple not have their parents' names on their birth certificate? How does a parent of that child go about explaining why that is the case? Why should a male same-sex couple have to adopt a child when one of them is biologically related to when most other modern jurisdictions have laws in place to enable surrogacy to take place? This draft law will implement provisions that solve both of these issues, whilst also placing civil partners on equal footing with married couples in terms of how they acquire legal parent status and parental responsibility. This, sir, is long overdue, considering the changes that civil partnerships were first introduced in 2012 and were made identical to marriage by the Civil Partnership Amendment Jersey Law 2002. Having this legislation in place will make Jersey the first of the Channel Islands to legally protect the rights of same-sex parents in law. This law also goes further than the counterpart law in the UK because it will retrospectively grant these rights to the majority of same-sex couples on the island. This complex legislation has been subject to high levels of professional scrutiny to confirm that it is fit for purpose and operates with no unintended consequences. It has taken a very long time to develop because of two main reasons. One, the area of law is extremely well prescribed for good reason. This means that when one provision is amended, amendments to a whole host of other provisions are required to enable them to continue to work together to achieve the desired policy effect. And this takes time and expertise to get it right. The effect of this draft law has to be correct and with no unintended consequences. It provides for a child's legal parents and who have parental responsibility for a child. I cannot think of many other legal provisions that have such an important function. All families in Jersey should expect to have equal legal recognition and protection from this law. If approved, will finally make this a reality. So the publication of the final report of the Independent Jersey Care Inquiry told us that parts of our legislation that relate to children were outdated or non-existent. I believe that this draft law represents an opportunity for us to update our legislation and provide for prospective parents what has been possible in the United Kingdom for over 15 years, and I hope that members will support it. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Doublé.
Thank you, sir. And this is such a significant day for the Assembly, and I'm absolutely delighted that we have got to this point. And as Deputy Gardner and others have mentioned, the lodging of this law was a result of lots of hard work by many people, not least the officers who drafted the law and the law drafting staff who have been working on it. And Deputy Mezek, I want to thank him for asking for that report to be produced with the Children's Commissioner, and to thank the previous Children's Commissioner as well, because that was one of the steps that allowed for progress to be maintained on this issue. And I do remember being part of the debate on same-sex marriage and being told at the time that this would all be sorted out. And as a member of the LGBT community myself, several of the fellow members of the community told me that they were having children around that time, and in the year or two after that marriage law was approved, and they were told when they were having their children and asking about their parental rights that it would be sorted out imminently. And some of those families said now have children who are 7 or 8 years old. That's how patient those families have had to be for this law to be progressed. And it is an extremely complex law. I think it's absolutely right that we have put the resources into this law and that it's being debated by the Assembly today, and I hope it will be supported unanimously today. In terms of the development of the law, this was my highest priority when serving the Assembly as Deputy Gardiner's Assistant Minister, and involved lots of keeping the focus on the law, escalating where necessary. And so I can't understate how much hard work has gone into this law, even to the point where senior law drafting staff told me that this was the most complex piece of legislation that has ever been produced in their memory. And the dedication by some of those staff, I recall on one occasion, a senior law drafter working on this from a hospital bed. So it has been a labour of love and determination from many, many people. And somebody that I would like to mention, because the principles and the content of the legislation that is before us today, I personally wouldn't have been able to progress it and gain the traction that I did without the paper that was written by the Jersey Law Commission. That was several years ago, and that was driven primarily by Barbara Corbett. And indeed, the award that Deputy Gardiner mentioned that I was nominated for, Barbara Corbett was also, Advocate Corbett was also nominated for award and won that award at the DeFerra Awards. So we must not forget her contribution and the contribution of the Jersey Law Commission, because that was significant. And it really allowed the officers and myself to continue at pace with this piece of work. Another thing to mention, I think, is the previous States Assembly, because, of course, although I was pretty relentless in campaigning for this myself, I brought a backbencher proposition at the end of the previous term to accelerate the work on this legislation, which was supported by the Assembly. And I think that political will and that decisiveness by the previous Assembly has contributed to the maintenance of this area as a political priority. And a previous speaker mentioned the small numbers of families involved. And perhaps the implication was that, actually I think the speaker did say so, why has such a huge resource gone into making this piece of legislation for a small number of families? And what I would say to that, Sarah, is that human rights are not optional. This legislation will realise fully the human rights of a group of children. It's actually not really about the parents. It's about children having their full human rights and knowing who their parents are in the law and being able to have the full rights associated with that. And although we are a small community, the LGBTQ plus community in Jersey and our families, we matter. And I hope that the Assembly will keep that principle close to its heart and maintain that principle in future decisions. I wanted to talk about some of the specific principles that have been taken forward as part of this legislation. And again, I wanted to thank the scrutiny panel because not only did they do the work to review this legislation really quickly, they did a very thorough job. And many of the issues raised were issues that I had questioned officers on myself and had to take some very hard decisions on whether to pursue those areas or not. One of them is the area of legitimacy. Now, I don't like this concept. I think it's outdated, and I don't think we should be labelling children as legitimate or not legitimate in any way whatsoever. But I was told that in order to tackle that piece of legislation, it would cause lengthy delays to this law. So the decision I took at the time was not to address that issue, but to progress with the principles of the same-sex parental rights. And I do think that needs to be looked at by another body. I think perhaps the Legislation Advisory Panel might be a good body to look at that. And I would be interested if the chair of that panel would perhaps be able to comment on that today. Another concept is parents being able to use the term mother or father and choose the term that aligns with their gender identity as a parent. It wasn't possible to allow that in the law. And one of the reasons is that the term mother is not just a term that we use in society, but it's also a term used and has a specific definition in the legislation. So that is something I would like to see addressed down the line. And another issue, which again was raised in the scrutiny review by one of the submissions, and I feel quite strongly about this, and I would like this to be addressed by the current government, is that, and again, I had to proceed with this because the alternative was delaying the legislation. But female same-sex couples are required to use fertility services in order to gain their legal parental rights. And at the moment, there is a cost associated with that. Now, there are, of course, other methods of starting a family outside of fertility treatment. And I think given that there is a cost involved, there should be some work done looking at either waiving the cost of that treatment or allowing legal agreements to be drawn up between sperm donors and lesbian couples or female couples who wish to conceive at home. So I would like the Minister's comment on that, please. And I note that although I think, and I hope that members will support this today, as the Minister mentioned in his opening speech, there are many, many consequential amendments, more than 33. Different laws need to be amended in order to bring this law into force. So there is still a long way to go. And I expect that the resources and the political will within government, I expect that to be maintained and for this work to be progressed at the same pace that it was being progressed, so that the families can have this law in force by the end of this year. And I support this law, sir, very, very much. I'm delighted that we're debating it today, and I hope that members will unanimously support the principles.
Thank you very much, Deputy. Does any other member wish to speak on the principles? If no other member wishes to speak on the principles, it might be sensible if we deal with this aspect before the adjournment. Then I close the debate and call on the Minister to respond.
Thank you, sir. And first of all, I'll consider the concerns of the Constable of St Brelade. I don't believe we have anything to be concerned about from what follows. I mean, this law is about ensuring that same-sex couples can now register births and become fully legal parents. And I can't see anything in the guidance that would necessarily should be concerned. The transgender issue isn't specifically looked at in this law. Of course, it will allow some transgender couples to to register birth or transgender people where one of the parents is transgender. Again, to address the issue fully would have delayed the law once again, and it was considered that at this point it was far better to bring the law before the Assembly rather than have another lengthy delay. I heard the comments from Deputy Doublé, and of course those are issues that we will look at. They are legal issues, and I'm not a lawyer, so I don't wish to comment further on those because they would require further legislation. I wish to thank, in summary, I wish to thank the Children, Education and Home Affairs Scrutiny Panel, the law officers, the law draftsmen, for their extensive work on this law, which I'm actually very proud to present to the Assembly today. We are still looking at the recommendations of the Scrutiny Panel, and of course those may be covered in further guidance. Finally, and I know that Deputy Gardner has already covered this, but I wish to thank in particular Deputy Doublé. Without her persistence, the law would not be probably in the chamber today and might have taken considerably longer to get here. She was very persistent to ensure that this legislation got the recognition that it should have. And of course, she lodged P26 2022 to expedite the debate, which was extremely important. At that time, we had broad support across the Assembly, and I hope that we still have that broad support today. So, sir, I call on members to vote on the principles and ask for the appel. Thank you, sir.
It is called for. I invite members to return to their seats. The vote is on the principles of the draft Children and Civil Status Amendments Jersey law. It's the greffier to open the voting and members to vote. Members have had the opportunity of casting their votes. I'll ask the greffier to close the voting. The principles have been adopted. 41 votes pour, no votes contre, no abstentions. Very well. Before I seek the adjournment, does the scrutiny panel wish to scrutinise this matter?
Sir, in the absence of Deputy Curtis, I, as Vice Chair, would also like to thank all our officers, and especially the officers of the scrutiny panel, for doing an exemplary piece of work on the report. But we do not wish to call this in, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Is the adjournment proposed?
Please, sir.
Very well. The Assembly stands adjourned until 2:50.